Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, acknowledge our relationships with the Katzie, Kwantlen, Matsqui, and Semiahmo First Nations. With that, I'd like to bring the regular meeting of Township Council to order, and the first item is the adoption and receipt of the agenda items, and I did get a request from the proponent of I-1 that they're not prepared to proceed. So with that being removed, I would ask for a motion. Councillor Arneson, second by Councillor Davis. Councillor Ferguson.
What was I-1 again? I was just double checking.
Well, it's the Qualico fourth reading.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
My question, if I may, through the chair to the clerk, when we have, I know that I don't expect an instant answer, when we have delegations that are similar, I'm looking at delegation, what's it, C5 and C6, to put C435, and they're both the same. Can we not either ask them to either go together and add, if I may, another delegation? I'm not saying we're going to do that tonight, but in the future, is there a method that we can do that, if I may?
Our practice has been when we receive two delegations, we put them on the same as they are done now, but we can definitely look into that. In this case, they did require 10 minutes. They do have a small PowerPoint, and it just worked more advantageously for them.
So I just trying to think, because currently we only allow 5, but we don't allow any in the end of the meeting anymore?
No, we haven't done that in quite a while.
Yeah, I'm dating myself here. So just thinking out loud, because I know some folks were turned away, and I'm just thinking about the 6th delegation. I'm not thinking about the 20th delegation. I'm just thinking about, it's like being in line for a concert or something.
Instances where we've had more than 5 delegations, we ask if it's a non-time sensitive matter that it move to the next agenda, which we have got with one of the requests from this week. And delegates are always invited to make written submissions to council as well to ensure that council gets the information. So we do accommodate them, just not necessarily in the meeting they needed.
Okay, thank you very much. And I do, Mr. Mayor, ask people to put things in writing. So thank you very much. That was my only question.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question on the agenda. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And Councillor Richter, just for information, I-1, the fourth reading was pulled by the request of the proponent. I-1, yeah, the fourth reading. There's only one fourth reading. Okay, where are we now? Okay, we'll move on to adoption of the minutes. Regular council meeting of June 27. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Kunst. Any errors or omissions? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Move on to delegations. There are 5 delegations today. We'll start with C1, Ms. Bonnie Henry, if you can come forward. And for all the delegations information, I'm sure you're already aware of it. You have 5 minutes to present. And if it gets close, I'll let you know so you can wrap up. So thank you. I'll get your mic on.
Okay. My name is Bonnie Henry, and I've owned the property at 23717 72nd Avenue for 23 years. My property borders a railroad track, and all other properties south are running with some degree of business. We are not a disruption to our neighbors or area. I have run the business from the property from the onset. Of the 4277 acres, I have approximately 8 acres of farmable land which is not being used or disturbed in any way by the business. This land is being used for hay production as well as a pasture for beef cattle or horses. The other 35 acres are not farmable. Of this non-farmable portion, we are using approximately 5 acres for the business. I felt that it is very important to bring to your attention that at no point would we be encroaching on any of the farmable land. The LC is already aware that the 35-acre portion of the property is non-farmable. A challenge we experience is locating a suitable alternative property to house the business. Nearly 80% of the township land is ALC. We have consulted multiple realtors and understand there are currently no viable options to relocate in the Lower Mainland, as cited from a just released market report, which I've handed out to you guys. I would like to bring to your attention that this company has operated in the township since 1976. For 45 years, we've operated proudly, taking care of our property and not disturbing neighbors. 4 generations of Henrys have lived in the township of Langley. 3 of those generations have lived on this property. It's important to consider the township would not be losing any farmable land. The front of the property is always kept pristine, and our family wants to stay on the land. Sorry. I'm asking you to reconsider your decision and understand that if I'm denied, not only will the company existence be put into question, the result would be I'd lose my property. I would appreciate the township's consideration to support me allowing to apply to the ALC.
Thank you. I do have a question, if you don't mind. Councillor Long has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and thank you for coming. And I know that I can find out all the background I need on this, but you said the business a number of times, and can you remind us what the business is? And I guess you've made application and that was denied here to proceed to the ALC. That part I understand. But
Yeah,
can you
I
tell us a
did.
bit more about what the business is? Do you mind? Yeah.
We have a power pole business, split rail business, and some drilling business. And in the you can see the front photos from the property.
Yeah.
What it looks like.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you,
No,
Worship.
thank you. Yeah, so other questions? Thank
Okay.
you. And just for delegates' information, if council does wish to proceed on any of them, any of the delegations, it comes to other business at the end of the meeting, just so you know. Any direction that council wishes to give, if they do, comes at the end of the meeting under other business, regards to any delegation, just so you know. All right, next delegation is Jim Clark. Please come forward.
Thank you, Mayor Froese and councillors, for having me here. Okay, the subject around groundwater and the depleting aquifers in Langley, the flowing wells that are running wild, that the government actually mandated that they be sealed off about 10 years ago. And also the TOL had actually got a private consulting firm in then that mandated that they be sealed off and not flowing to waste. We're losing thousands of gallons a minute there to flowing wells to the ditch every day out of our aquifers. The observation wells drilled into the aquifers are showing that they're still dropping. And namely, the worst, of course, is the Hoppington, which you live on, Mayor, I believe. And you got a nice deep well there. You don't have to worry too much. But there's a lot of people drying up there. And we've been replacing wells since I've been in the industry. It started to deplete there in 1975, and by 1980, the observation wells, the early ones, showed that they had 5 years consistently of 1 foot of drawdown in the aquifer, and that's still dropping today, and there's over 40 feet gone. A lot of your neighbor friends up there have had to spend a lot of money on us well drillers to go in there and drill, which used to cost about $20,000 to $25,000 to do, but with current costs and that and increases, it's costing them anywhere up to $40,000 and $40,000 plus they're drilled into a deeper aquifer. Now, of course, that aquifer means groundwater for irrigation and of course, as well as our people. And you got to look at the serious, well, both are serious, but irrigation means food also. That the two words mean the same thing. If you haven't got water, you haven't got food. And things are not looking good there to some extent. It's still dropping. You've had several big-time consultants come in over the years and have done the right thing, and you got back in the 80s and 90s, such as Golders, Piteau Associates, Gartner Lee, and the MOE, Ministry of Environment. They've been on this all the time, looking at things over the years, and nothing's happened yet. And with both the government and the township sort of mandating 10 years ago that we've got to stop these flowing wells, that nothing's happened. So the government 10 years ago, they get going on with their water well regulations, and they mandate that all drillers and well drillers and pump installers have to take a course, and they've got to be certified. So in that certification, part of it is into this flowing well thing now for the pump fellas, eh? Now, the thing that the government didn't realize, the pump guys have got a lot of different tasks or things they do, and sealing up flowing wells, apparently, as it turned out, they didn't really have a lot of skills. It's not a big thing for them to change over, but they sort of need a brush up course. So what's happened since then, nothing's been happening because they don't really know how to do it or want to do it in most cases, I think, and the wells, like I say, they're just flowing to the ditch and continuing to flow. So I don't know what we can do here. I mean, eventually what happens with an aquifer like that, or we got multiple aquifers and they're dropping. I should say also that the population, the growth on top is unreal. Lots more water, deeper wells, bigger pumps. We've gone from installing a half-horse pump at 100 feet that does 5 or 10 gallons a minute. We're putting in 300-foot wells now that got a 2 to 3 horsepower pump that's doing 40 gallons a minute. Not to say they're pumping that 24/7, but they got the capabilities. There's a lot of water down there, but we're heading downhill here, and eventually we're going to get down there. It's going to be we're a long ways off for that to happen, but now is the time we got to do something. We got to at least seal these wells up. And also, what happened, one of the mandates was in these reports was that from 2010 to 2020, the township was looking to have a 30% reduction in water use up in the uplands or in Langley, town, wherever. And now we went backwards, I think, on that. We didn't make too much progress there. So things aren't looking good there. So I don't know what the heck to do here. We got to do something here. As a driller, I'm out there every day in the field. I see what's going on. We're coming. The last 7 years, I worked with a Chilliwack outfit. We came down here drilling wells all the time. We had 2 rigs operating in Langley here at one point, and even a third at times. Now we've got, we used to have 14 well drillers in the township. Now we got 1. Field drilling is the sole survivor of just age. We're all retiring. I don't drill myself anymore, and everybody else has flew the coop. They're gone. So we're going to start getting guys coming from up country in here too, I guess, which is fine. But we got to train them a little bit for the area now. But anyways, I guess it gets to the point is how long can we keep dropping this aquifer? Once water levels drop in the aquifer, you got to realize, and this is all world sea stuff, this is global stuff. It's not just something we're dealing with here. You go down to YouTube and it's everywhere on there. And there's countries that are in horrible shape. We're not there yet, but we are headed in that direction slowly but surely. I think a lot of those companies, it seems they stood there with their arms crossed. It doesn't matter how broke or poor a company is. There's some hydrogeologist around there knows what's going on with their groundwater.
Your time is up, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, thanks.
Thank you.
And I just hope we can do something about this, okay?
I do have some questions from council, so if you don't mind staying there, I'll start with Councillor, I think just about everybody. I'll start with Councillor Richter.
Lots of questions.
A lot of questions, you bet. Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Clark, for coming today. I appreciate
Thanks,
your help and advice on this, and also the fact that you sat on the Water Resources Management Advisory Committee way back 20 years ago when we put the water management.
We go
plan
back
in
30
place.
years, 30 years, don't we, Kim?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
I think so, yeah. So,
So I wanted to know more about the well, like the dropping aquifer. What specific area in the township is being hardest hit by this?
The
Hoppington.
The Hoppington is, but now we got, there's been recent maps made out that show more aquifers beneath and all around, which is a little complicated, but I think what's happening is what we call the aerial aquifers around there are starting to deplete. You've got a big, like that's right in the middle of Langley, 50 square kilometers, and we got this 40-foot deep pit in there. And so the groundwater, I think, is what we're seeing as drillers is coming in from aerial aquifers. They're not as strong and they don't move water as well, but it's seeping in over the years because we're drilling around there now, too, replacing wells that are drying up slowly.
Okay,
So-
so you're saying that wells need to be sealed. Where do these wells, where are these wells?
On the top, when the pump goes in,
Yeah.
if a well flows, the water's going to want to come over the top. The pump company's supposed to just, they got special equipment, or fittings they put on there just to seal it up so it doesn't flow. Only what comes out is what's pumped out then. Whatever you need comes out. If you're not pumping it, nothing comes out. Now they pump out, and some of these wells are sitting there 40, 50 gallons a minute into the ditch. Not very good.
Okay, and if, would you be able to give our staff some locations of where these waters are running into ditch so staff can go and investigate?
I think what I'll do, Asher's on holidays, my good friend Asher, at the next couple of weeks. When he gets back, I'll get together with him and we'll come up with a little plan here. Maybe we can do something.
Okay.
Okay.
So what you're basically saying is this is a priority for the township and it needs to be on council's radar,
Well,
particularly
absolutely.
going forward.
Because, as I said earlier, it's really hard to get the water back into the aquifer. And I think the scariest word out there in the environment now is tipping point, right? You don't want to pass a tipping point on anything now, do you?
Right.
And I don't know, I don't think they've ever said that. Maybe somebody here knows, but that's a type of hush-hush. You don't really hear that readily, eh? But that's where you're headed. We're headed that way eventually. It will go that way. It may be years yet. It's not going to happen the next few years, but now is the time. It's easier to fix it now than later, that's for sure.
Thank you very much for coming out today.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes.
Yes, hi, thank you very much for coming. I agree with a lot of your summation about this being a global problem, because I know in the township of Langley, historically, we've had these discussions, and I realize it's becoming more critical at this time, and that there does need to be proactive action. So I do thank you for coming today, and once again, drawing this to our attention. As you referenced, we've had a lot of studies in the past, and I think that the one that I recall was this problem of the flowing aquifers, the artesian wells, for example, and wells that haven't been capped off that continue to run and basically go off into other places. So I'm not sure myself what the remedy is, but I do want to ask you some questions, and they may be broader than the specific focus that you're dealing with today. But so if we're looking at that, I wondered if you're aware, is there funding from other levels of government to help us? The province is basically in charge of groundwater. So, and I understand this is a local initiative. This is something that happens with residents that are here. Is there some role that you either know of or could recommend for the province to play in terms of conservation and helping us to manage, basically, which is a pretty challenging issue?
It's very challenging, and I don't know whether they've got money for you or not. You may have to go there and knock on their door. I don't know. But yeah, so go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I understand your sentiment. It would be something we'd have to advocate
Yes.
for if that doesn't
Yes.
happen right now. It seems to me the other thing that hasn't been brought up today, and you've referenced the fact about our growth, but effectively every time we put more impervious surfaces in, we have less and less water that's infiltrating in any event into our aquifers. So we have two uses. We have the waterways and watercourses it should go to, but also needs to replenish into our aquifers. So it just so happens I was reading an article from Water Canada, and it was talking about communities that have created what they call a master plan for their water. And I know the township has many plans, but it's a way to look at like the cycle as a one water kind of issue. I wonder if that's something that you've thought of and you think would be worthy of a recommendation for
Well,
us.
that gets into the engineering end of it from the reports from these companies that I mentioned had been here. So I dove into though and had a little look at stuff there, but I can't comment on that too much because it's a little bit above what I'm sort of seeing from the actual being out there in the field and seeing what's going on every day on a daily basis. And of course, the charts and that are there are simple to read and show the story right away.
Well, of course, the other wild card is climate change.
And that's something we didn't bring up here in our 5 minutes, but that's a big factor. That's what sort of hit California down there. And here we got all the water in the world, and we got the recharge, we get all we want now. But what happens, say, in 5 or 10 or even 20 years, we get a 5-year drought? That's going to impact us tremendously, and we're not prepared for that. This aquifers drop. The aquifers are dropping now, and that comes along. It's just going to go worse, and then it's going to get to where you can't. It's just, what do you do? Who knows 20 years in the future? Can't really say what's going to happen, but we always got to be prepared for that.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Mr. Clark, Jim, good to
I'm
see you.
here.
Never
How you doing,
short,
Steve?
never, very well. You're never short of a few words.
There's another man on the Hopkinton Aquifer there. We had to drill him a new well.
Yes.
Hopington.
Hopington, yeah,
Hopington?
more than once.
Okay.
More than once, but
In this room, I'll call it the Hopington. Fine, that's great.
yeah, that's Hopington, or Beyond Hope. Okay, so I wanted to ask you. Now, you and your folks are members of the BC Groundwater Association
That's
as well,
correct.
right? I'm not going to ask you what you're saying. You can send us a letter on that, because I know that we get, how about the atmospheric river that came? We had all that in November. Did that help the, aquifer at all, Jim?
I don't think that it's such a flash flood sort of a thing. They don't help that much, I don't think. It takes time to get the water into the ground and that, so it's probably more of a detriment than anything there. I can't say this, I'm going to put some in there, but not enough to notice.
Okay, so Councillor Richter has asked the questions about the location and the capping, and I think Councillor Anderson asked about the pricing. Moving into the future, in the past, myself included, we used to get water delivered during the summer because, some of our wells were drying up from a guy who used to play rugby with the Deglin family.
Right.
So is there a need for that? Are you seeing a need for that again?
Oh,
as the
sure,
cycles-
there's a need for water delivery for sure. There's a lot of people with wells drying up, and they haven't got the money. Now it's 40 grand up on the Hoppington there for a well, a deep pump, and possibly treatment. It could hit as high as $50,000. I think, a lot of people are property rich and cash poor. That's a lot of money. It's more than a chunk of change now. So it's nice to have some water. I got another, the Langley purchased that property across from the airport, the old Blair farm with the well on it there. I've got that well on my eye here for another meeting. I won't take your time with that today, but that's perfect, maybe perfect for emergency waters, which you do have an emergency water plan, but didn't mention anything about groundwater, but we'll talk about that one another day.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I think some of my questions were already answered, like artesian wells. It just seems like a crime to have it pouring out into the ditch.
Well, it doesn't make any sense at all. It's just absolutely environmentally horrible and for me to see that every day. That's what my heart works on, I get little palpitations here.
But I see there's two issues here. One is we're taking out too much, or we're maybe not letting it, we're not using the water properly, and we're not letting it
Re-infiltrate.
re-infiltrate.
That's right, yeah. And as Councillor Arneson mentioned about the asphalt and all that, all adds up. But in a sense, a lot of these big properties, they can work areas there where they could put swales in maybe or something where rainwater can gather and then seep in slowly. But that one thing with the Hoppington, most of that aquifer is covered by what we call it's a real brown clay that's real like butter, for the first 15 feet. That's not letting anything through. The place that's getting through the Hoppington is down where the old strawberry farms were north of the highway, Fraser Highway, on the old strawberry flats there. That's all sand there, and it goes in there. But most of it is not very permeable at all.
Yeah.
So, recharge is a big thing. That's what's got to be done. We're going to have to do something here soon. Eventually.
So I know that, we have talked about whether we're in the water business or we're in, maybe GVRD, we could bring all the water in. But if we bring all the water in from GVRD, we got to leave it here. I think that's the key. You can't let it get to the ditches. You can't let it pump it back out to the Fraser.
Well, no, you don't want to be running that into the ditch. It's 3 times. The groundwater is at about a third the cost of a GVRD water.
Yeah,
so it's inexpensive, but it's still, we need it. We got to have it.
Your experience, and I know how old you are. Has it always been 3 times expensive, or was it a lot cheaper?
Well, it's varied a bit. I just saw that was what I saw recently, but it's always been way cheaper.
Yeah.
And of course, the township picked up on that years ago because they use how much water are we using? 80% or something. The groundwater in parts here, I think, are I don't know, a third or something. A considerable amount of water is coming from the ground here, but that's limited too. It's becoming limited what they can do there. Otherwise, they'd probably go for more.
A sleeping time bomb. We have to work on it. We have to.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Thanks, Mr. Clark, for coming today. Appreciate this.
You're welcome.
This is some of it, new information for me to hear. I'm just wondering about so I understand these wells are flowing. The water just continues to come out, and so the best solution is to seal them.
The pump installer would put on proper fittings on top to seal it up so it can't flow. It's not a big job to do it at all in most cases. but it just isn't getting done, and the government mandated it needs to be done. The TOL mandated that, but nobody's out checking or going after them to do this. So they're not doing it. They don't really want to do it or have the skills, I'm not sure. One or the other or both.
And do you know, like, for how long it's been that this has been mandated that these need to be sealed? Like, is this
Since
for a
day
decade?
one.
Since day one.
1920s when they started washing down pipes out here. Oh, sure.
So 100 years at least.
Yeah, 100 years of flowing wells around.
So any idea, any estimate? Like, do we have hundreds of these wells that are flowing?
Okay,
or?
yes, I do. One of the reports there, which was done recently, they studied around, they figured there's 6,700 wells they could accrue, and 570 were flowing. Now, if you take, say, an average of 10 gallons a minute for 570 wells, that's 5,700 gallons a minute. Well, I can't tell, and they can't tell you. What happens with these engineering reports when you come into groundwater, they can't see everything, so they can't conclude everything, so they leave things hanging a bit. But even at 10 gallons a minute, that's, what do we got there? 5,700 gallons a minute.
Right.
But my thought, well, let's call that 3,000. That's still more than a little bit of water. That's a lot of water, and that's serious. We just need a big number there, big enough to grab attention. I can't say it was 5,700 for sure, but somewhere up there, it's up there. It's not good.
Right. So you're saying that it's not that expensive to do. We just need to require it to be done, check on it, and make sure that it happens. That's sort of what you're
That's
suggesting.
exactly right, to comply with the current law.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Councillor Kunst.
So those would probably all be on private property, right?
Yes, for the most part, they would be industrial or private. A lot of industrial farm properties and private, everything.
So
Fisheries, we got a fish hatchery here.
So would the residents even know that they've got this and that they need to do this? Is this just?
I think that they do, maybe, but it costs money, and nobody wants to spend any money on that, on groundwater at all.
Okay.
So I think that most of them are aware that they shouldn't be flowing to the ditch now.
So my last question is, are there other municipalities that are dealing with this, and what are they doing about it?
Well, this is a
That you're
global
aware
thing.
of.
You got to look on a global basis.
Right.
On they're getting their button gear and remedying it.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
so
And a lot of them, it's too late though. Most of the ones you're going to see on TV on the internet are too late now. They're going down and they haven't got a way out because you got to have another source to get the water there. So if you got a drought, that relieves the rainfall. And if rivers dry up from ice packs further up way up in the mountains, that's a problem too. And we're losing ice packs all over the place.
Right.
So yeah, so it's something that you can't underestimate, and how fast it could happen if the right weather conditions happen or other scenarios.
Okay, well, thanks for coming, and it's nice
You're
to meet you.
welcome.
You seem to know everybody here on council, so.
I knew 4 of them for sure. We're all been around a while here. Davis and I think we were in school together pretty much. They're pretty close to it anyways. At least the Langley Hotel back in the day, eh?
Oh, tell us some more stories.
There you go. You call me later. I'll give you my email if you want to figure out what was going on.
That'll be another. That'll be another delegation. You come and just talk about David Davis. That'd be perfect.
Yes.
No, but
Mayor Froze, if
yes.
I could have one more
Sure.
little thing I want to say here before I leave a minute. I've had to come up with a scenario so people could really get a grip on what's going on here with this flowing well situation and the water. Water moves all over the place, but it's not always easy to get it back where you want to get it. We can contaminate it, we can mess it up, we can clean it up, we can fix it, we can use it again. And I was thinking one day, well, what happens if somebody bought a new house and they're out in the garage and they're unpacking all their stuff and they come across the garden hose and they take it out to the tap in the backyard there and they stretch it out and they turn the tap on. And the guy says, "Wait, what the hell are you doing there?" "Oh, I just like the water. I want it to run. My neighbor's got their well's flowing down there. I want a flowing well too. We're going to let this run." And never turn it off. Do you think there's anybody in North America could actually do that? To that, and how much water that is, just 5 gallons a minute? Nobody would. But when it comes to flowing wells, people love their flowing wells, actually. A lot of them still love it, and that's part of the problem we got here. They don't want to go after fixing them up, even though they're losing their water eventually. So there you go.
Good.
You're going to go home and turn your tap on forever?
A lot of water.
Think about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, then.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing this.
Thanks
to our
very much,
attention.
everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to Mr. Joe Sindrich. Joe Sindrich.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome here.
Before you start my 5 minutes, if I can add to it. 25 years ago, I proposed to engineering here perforated storm drain pipe.
Yeah.
So the water that's running down the storm,
Yeah.
what can percolate back into the ground will, the excess will continue through the pipe, but it will replenish the aquifer. But they didn't think that was a good idea.
Okay.
Today,
So-
I think it is a good idea if you look at all the subdivisions. You get at least 25, 30% percolation. Water sucks water.
Okay, we do have a lot of delegations, so we'll let you get on to your topic, but thanks for reminding us of that.
We have a major water problem at 232nd and 47th Avenue, Peterson Road School. Roughly 25 years ago, when they gravelled the schoolyard, they put catch basins in. Water wouldn't percolate in the ground, so they dug in a rock pit, which wouldn't take the water. Then they paved the school ground, which made the problem worse. So they dug a rock pit adjacent to my property, 650 feet away, and piped the water to my property, which now percolates onto my property because it's lower. In November, all that stormwater overflowed the rock pit, as it always does, went south on 232nd Street, north from 46th to my driveway, down my driveway, causing a major slide on my property, which is going to cost me a fortune to fix because all my riprap is gone now. I don't think that you're allowed to divert water onto other people's property, 650 feet away. I'm not the only one that has a problem. My neighbors also have a problem, and one of the councillors talked to one of the neighbors. I want to know what you're going to have to do to fix this problem, because I no longer can tolerate all that water. 5 million liters of water a year, average, comes onto my property. Just from the school ground, not from the roads, not from 46th, not from 47th, not from 232nd. All that water comes down my driveway. One of your people suggests I put a curb across my driveway and direct it onto the other people's property. Not my problem. I want to know what you're going to do to resolve it.
Thank you. And you've been there how long?
I've been there for over 40 years.
Have you done anything to your property, changed it,
I
put
have
buildings
talked to
on,
your,
or?
no, I have talked to your people, and they, not my problem, that's stormwater, I'm utility, I'm this, I'm that.
Yeah, no, it's good
And
to
one
know.
gentleman comes out there and says, it's not your problem, it's not your rain.
No,
I
know.
want to resolve this amiably.
Yeah, last November, I think water went in places we never expected to see it last November.
Well,
But,
I'll tell you.
I'll go on to Councillor Kuntz. Councillor Kuntz has a question. Yeah,
Hi, Mr. Sindrich.
Hi.
Yeah, I'd like to know, you seem to have a solution, at least from what when we chatted, that there was a possible solution.
Well,
that you
why
had.
don't they direct it to the creek behind the school? There is no storm line and no storm ditches there. Nothing. It all slopes. 47 slopes to the west onto 232nd. 232nd at 47 slopes south. At the other end at 46, it slopes north, and I happen to be the low spot. The road is saturated because the water can't go anywhere. The asphalt's all broken to heck because it's saturated. You're floating on water. Nothing is being done.
Okay, thanks. That was my question.
Yeah, thanks. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, did you say there was a pipe going onto your property from the other
No,
property?
the pipe runs from 650 feet, 200 meters from the school ground, adjacent to my property on 233rd.
Okay,
A 6-inch pipe, which they installed because they couldn't get the water off the school ground. The backyard in the school ground is flooded every time. It should be also drained down towards the creek.
okay. And so the water ends up on your property
Yes.
because the pipe ends at your property?
It ends into a rock pit,
Yeah.
which will not take the flow, which overflows, runs down the road, contaminating 4 driveways on the east side, opposite side of the road to mine. And then when the water gets up to 2 inches there, it flows across the road down my driveway
Okay.
into my field. One of my fields I just can get on now. You know what it's like to get onto a field when it,
And,
Okay.
and the pipe that's in there now, could it be extended to the creek?
what it should be done is if you cannot get rid of the water at the school ground, dig another rock pit in the back play area of the school ground, or extend the pipe to the creek at the south end of the school ground.
Okay. Okay,
Because the school ground is flooded also, the play field.
thank you.
Thank you.
But I
Have you spoken to the school district? Because it's not our property there, so.
well, you
It's
people
township.
seem to
No,
clean
it's
the
not, no,
rock pit.
no, it's not you people. I'm asking if you brought your concerns
No,
to the school district. Okay.
no, I've talked
There
to
may-
them.
There may be
I've
something.
talked to council, or to
Yeah.
the engineering, they
Yeah.
came up,
Yeah.
well, Bill's story came up, and they cleaned the rock
No,
pit.
just a suggestion, because you're talking about school district property and some concerns. It may be,
Well, I'm-
helpful to you
okay.
to go there. I'm just suggesting. You don't have to. If you don't want to, I'm just, because it's not our property, it's
Mr.
school board.
Froese, I'm a
Yeah.
taxpayer
Yeah, I know.
here.
But
I
know, and these-
cannot divert my water onto your
No,
property.
I'm not saying, I'm asking, because you're referring to the school board property, that normally if it's another person's property, you would talk to them. I'm just wondering if you had, and I'm just advising you may want to see if you
No,
can
I
get
don't
some-
want to.
Okay, then you don't
And
have
I
to.
don't want to.
Okay, then.
The road
okay.
also drains onto my property, the
Okay,
asphalt of the
that's
road.
another issue, that's ours, no problem. But I
Okay.
just asked if you'd spoken
I'm
to
a
the,
taxpayer here. I pay my taxes to Langley.
yeah, and to the school district. Yeah, so I'm just
I pay 'em
asking.
to you
know,
guys.
Not arguing with you, I'm just saying,
Well,
ask if you had.
if we can't do this amiably, then I will have to do it differently.
Yeah, it's fine. I have another question if you wish.
If that's what you wish, I will do it.
Yeah, it's
I'll
up
do
to
it
you.
legally then.
Yeah, Councilor
Thank you.
Arnson. Okay,
Hello?
he doesn't want to talk to us anymore, I
Sorry.
think. He doesn't like
No,
us.
if you don't mind, I do have a
was-
couple of
yeah.
questions. Thank you. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate your frustration. My first thought is about, I'm not specifically aware, other than the details that you brought to us today, but I'm just wondering, since you reference your neighbors, have you considered that it might be a best-case scenario to work with them to address the situation across the neighborhood, as opposed to, I know you're saying that you're the most affected because you're the lowest point, but it seems like it's probably a cumulative issue across the neighborhood. So I just wondered if that might be an option.
I think one of your counselors knows that other people are concerned.
Okay, and my second question was, because I'm sure you have an area of understanding and expertise about water management, because you're talking rather fluently about a pit. I'm wondering whether or not you've considered, my only concern off the top of my head about this idea of redirecting the water to the creek is that potentially it might be contaminated from some of the things that it's been going through. So I'm just going to suggest potentially a cistern on the school site instead, as a way to manage a volume of water rather than just, shooting it out towards the creek.
It doesn't seem to be a concern that the water's contaminated from the winter's ice treatment and going onto my property. So why should it be a concern at the school?
Well, it's a concern to me because
concern
I'm
to
worried.
me.
Yeah, the waterways we need to protect, and so I'm just trying to find some way that's going to address the issues.
You can let it percolate into the ground, filling the aquifer. The Langley is full of septic systems.
Yeah.
The water is cleaned. It takes 15 years to get down there, roughly. It gets down there clean.
Okay.
We just have to control it.
Okay.
But there we have no control, and the major slide has taken my property. I thank you for waiving the fees, but
Okay, thank you.
anyhow, if I have to go the other way, then please give me a response, so I know what I have to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, move on to John Caladrella, Committee Co-Chair of Agriculture Advisory and Economic Enhancement Committee, and I think right after is Amanda Smith from the same organization, so I think you'll coordinate your presentation. Thank you.
We're actually together.
We're actually together.
Okay.
Teamwork.
It's the same presentation.
Okay, so you got 5 minutes. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I guess I'll get the slides. Didn't receive one.
Sorry, what?
Small glitch. Okay, Mayor Froze, councilors, thank you for hearing our presentation. I'm John Calderella, co-chair of the AEEC. And
I'm Anna Smith. I'm on the committee with the AEC. We're here to do the presentation. And as you know, I always work with the Farmers Institute and for Langley Environmental Partner Society.
okay, and basically our presentation, as we get our slide here organized, we'll get started here anyway without it. It's AEC Future of Farming Task Force Summary. Just to give you a little bit of background on this, in December 2019, Council referred the concept of establishing a task force to review the future of farming in Langley to the Agricultural Advisory and Economic Enhancement Committee, which we will refer going forward as the AEC. At its January 2020 meeting, the AEC supported the idea, included it in the proposed 2020 work program, and additionally, the 2021 work program. The purpose of the task force was to provide input and feedback into the exploration of the future of farming in context of the agricultural viability strategy, consideration of the existing bylaws and policies, examining the relevant case studies with an overall objective to promote the business of farming in the Township of Langley. Task force members consisted of the entire AEC with feedback from the Langley Environmental Partnership Society, Langley Sustainable Agricultural Foundation, and the Langley Farmers Institute.
So we did have some key tasks through the terms of reference, and those are as following. So we were undertaking a review of the agricultural viability strategy and providing a welcoming business environment and a secure agricultural land base to identify action items for the benefit to agriculture in relation to the future of farming, the farming protection, assistance to small and medium-sized farms, food security, and regulations. We considered the existing regulatory context, specifically bylaws and policies in the Township of Langley that currently provide guidance and regulate farming. The objective was to compile information and comment on the effectiveness of the bylaws and policies that would subsequently assist in forming the recommendations in relation to the future of farming, farming protection, assistance to small, medium sized farms, and food security. And there was also conducting case study analysis as time permitted to determine the complexities of farmers applying to the township to complete farm work and provide possible recommendations to reduce the complexities and barriers in relation to the future of farming, farming protection, and assistance to small and medium-sized farms and food security. So for your information, the terms of reference are included in the Future Farming Task Force Summary Report Appendix.
We came up with 5 lenses. The purpose of the task force was to identify actions for the benefit to agriculture in relation to the future of farming, farming protection, assistance to small and medium-sized farms, food security, and regulations. These 5 lenses are the focus of the 3 key tasks in the term of reference for the task force: agricultural viability strategy review, township bylaws and policies review, and practical case study scenarios. The task force developed a context to the 5 lenses to ensure the interpretation of the key tasks was keeping in mind the objective of promoting the business of farming in the township.
The task force completed a review of the agricultural viability strategy while keeping in mind the AVS's vision, which is to support agriculture while fostering and encouraging sustainable and viable production. Farmers are respected and appreciated for their contributions to the community and its citizens. The AVS recognizes 4 key strategy areas. The task force, in relation to the 5 lenses, reviewed 2 sections: welcoming business environment and secure agricultural land base. The AVS describes the 2 sections as follows: a welcoming attitude for agricultural expansion among staff and council will contribute to agricultural development, and the township enjoys the benefits of having 3/4 of its total land base within the agricultural land reserve. Protection of this land for agriculture will encourage farmers to increase agricultural development in the township.
Regulations review. After the ABS review, the task force completed a high-level review of the legislative framework of the different levels of government, federal, provincial, regional, and local. This exercise was intended to provide a means of understanding the broader context in which the township and the farmers operate under the relevant levels of government.
So next, the AAEEC members split into 3 groups: communication strategy, which would be the township website, review of farming policies and attracting new farmers to determine the complexities and barriers for farmers in relation to the 5 lenses. Communication is a key component for farmers to obtain information from their local government regarding proposed activities on their farm, as well as a means to receive information on upcoming events or requirements, such as regulatory updates and changes. The communication strategy case study group reviewed the current township website and cultural components for ease of access to information. They also looked at other local government websites that land in the ALR for areas or ideas that would be valuable to add to the township's website. The regulation case study group did a review of farm-related bylaws and policies to understand farm bylaws and determine complexities for farmers. They had discussions with the Ministry of Agriculture and food agricultural groups such as LEPS, LSAF, and the Langley Farmers Institute, as well as their own farming network for input. The new farmer attraction case study group completed research to determine if there were any additional avenues the township could encourage for the utilization of the ALR lands. For the case studies, the groups met 7 times outside of the regular AAEEC meetings and spent numerous hours completing the research. Finally, the task force worked through 6 potential real-life questions or scenarios a farmer and or a landowner may ask the township, and also look for ways to reduce the red tape. Some of the findings from these scenario questions were: information was difficult to find quickly or at all on the township website. Some searching in other external governmental bodies' websites were required to understand the whole picture. Township staff did respond to the inquiries, and most of the inquiries were directed to the agricultural planner.
Recommendations. From all of the research findings from the case studies and scenario questions, as well as corresponding supporting sections of the agricultural viability strategy, the task force developed 10 recommendations in priority order for council to endorse for the AAEC to investigate further. For further details of the work the task force completed, as our presentation was a general summary, please see the Future of Farming Task Force Summary Report, including in the last AEEC minutes in the agenda package. We would like to note that the 2022 Council endorsed work plan, the AEC started the work on recommendations 1 and 2. The results from those efforts are the following: using documented input from the AEC members, the Township Agricultural website content will be updated soon, and the AEC made the following motion at the May 25th meetings: that the Farm Policy and Regulatory Review Working Groups of the AEC recommendations that the 2023 Agricultural Advisory and Economic Enhancement Committee consider adding to the work plan community engagement for the farming community to address issues identified as per the ongoing work of the AEC and the Future Farming Task Force. Current AEC has expressed interest in continuing this work into 2023.
Great.
Oh, and there it is.
There it is. Thank you very much. We'll have staff.
We had some pretty pictures.
There's some pretty cool
You could have
pictures.
seen those to make it more entertaining.
Yeah,
So-
we'll make sure that staff do distribute this the slide deck to members of council, so we have it.
Thank you.
But thanks.
Is there any questions?
Yes, I've got a few here. I'll start with Councillor Richter.
Yes, and I wanted to thank you both very much for all the work that you've clearly done on this report and the consultation. Very good job, thank you. I did have a question about 2A, recommendation 2A. What does a meat licensing system and residential flexibility mean? And I'm specifically wondering in regards to water and waste disposal.
Good question.
That's why we really wanted to defer to our township liaison. What we can do is get more information and get back.
Get back to you on it, because I'm not sure how to answer that one.
Yeah, we've had discussions in the past about abattoirs.
Yes.
And my understanding is abattoirs use a lot of water.
Yes, they do.
And we've had a whole theme in today's delegations on water resources, and they're depleting. So, yeah, I guess the other question that I have is, will recommendation, or will these recommendations be coming to council to adopt at the next meeting, or are you hoping that they're going to be adopted at this meeting?
Well, we're hoping that they get adopted, that we can continue on the work,
Yeah.
continue working on it. We'd like to say we've started on the first few of our 10 recommendations, and we'd like to continue working on all of them and continue working. And as we do, we can present them to you.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I've got questions around 2A. I think that staff or somebody needs to give us a detailed presentation
Absolutely.
around that one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming today and making this presentation. Really appreciate the work that this committee has done over the last probably 2 to 3 years on this. It's been an incredible amount of work, and I really appreciate the efforts that went into it. I think this has been a very successful committee the last few years. And in addition, I think it's important to acknowledge as well the contributions from staff, some of them sitting in the room here today, that made it's a considerable contribution to the efforts that went into this report. So very in depth. I was wondering if you had any sort of sort of thoughts on some of the strategies that that I know we discussed a little bit throughout the time, but that might help to promote agricultural use of our ALR land, particularly those areas that are not being used currently. I think, if I remember, it's around 35% of our ALR land is actually being used for some sort of agricultural purpose. And so I'm wondering if maybe just some pre-thoughts as to some of the strategies that we've discussed that might be effective in helping to promote land agricultural use in the other 65% of our ALR lands.
Basically, I think a lot of it is come up with ideas in getting, even if these people don't want to farm, maybe create some sort of way of getting them to lease the land to people who do want to farm. And I think a lot of those ideas we talked about, discussed, and I think that going forward, I think we got to work on a lot of those ideas of, getting people that want to farm with people that have land that aren't farming, and maybe make it viable to them to, want to contribute and put their land into the farming costs, because we do have a lot of land that isn't being farmed at all.
And I know that even in the past, in the meetings, we've discussed some things just as initiatives, or what can the Township of Langley do to make, some sort of incentive to use that property. And really, that's a big task to undertake. That's why we really just wanted to make your website more functional first. So it's kind of baby steps here, because once the township shows that rural landowners really make a difference in the Township of Langley and utilizing their property, hopefully some sort of incentives may come down the pipe. This is quite a long-term plan.
Yeah, I fully agree. This is a very long-term plan. You've given lots of things for this committee to do, probably for the next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely.
But I certainly am excited about it. I think this is the kind of work that I was hoping would come out of the committee when this went forward, and certainly it has. So really appreciate the efforts you've made, and thank you for presenting today.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you very much for coming. We had a nice little chat prior to the start of the meeting today, so I got a little bit of a preview, I guess, of some of the overarching thoughts, I think, about farming in particular. Yeah, so I do thank you very much for this very detailed report. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I had a thought. When you look at all of this, what occurs to me more broadly is that being a regulated community is a bit of an elephant in the room that hardly ever gets discussed. So I don't know if it was something that became a topic for the task force to try and make any determinations or recommendations about what that could look like in the future if the township were wishing to address opportunities such as other communities who are able to have farm bylaws and to regulate along with the province some of our land uses. So just that question. Thank you.
So, yeah, that's still, I think, overreaching what we can answer today. I mean, the fact that it is regulated did come up in conversations almost every time we met. And I think it is, what can we do around being within that, what can we do with still being regulated? And just with providing more information on agriculture in Langley. But it is something that's going to be part of the work plan, even though it's not on here.
Right, it's not listed, but it's a subplot.
It all plays a part altogether, because we know where we are regulated.
Oh, I understand you know that. Thank you. And I guess my corollary to that is that really some of these things had been brought up in the past, and I certainly have talked to individuals, this idea of small-scale processing and co-ops and things like that, really would be an ideal thing to work with I know the province, what they want to achieve with, their policies, but in effect, we can be stymied sometimes by allowable uses or resources and all those kind of things. So I think that that's sort of like the perfect storm and something to focus on, to say this is really what's needed. How can we take this step forward? And I guess my next question really has to do with, would it be under the future consideration, the evolution of farming and agri-tech? I'm starting to think about the province and vertical farming and things like that. Okay, so I assumed it was on your radar and it would be something you would want to be dealing with.
So yeah, that also didn't come out in recommendations, but it is, and that's the benefit of having the economic enhancement part to our, because that is where the talk about agri-tech and getting funding, because it was more business related and encouraging that. So we've also discussed that too, and I'm sure that our township liaison in that way is working on it.
Well, I could always tune into your meetings. I'm sure that's a possibility, future meetings. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yeah, thank you, John and Amanda, for coming today. I appreciate all the work you've done as a person, a non-farmer, but was 9 years as the board of directors for Otter Farm and Home Cooperative for 9 years, 3 terms, and learning about the agricultural business, always having my nomination papers signed by farmers. But the key thing is now, and just because we're a regulated community doesn't mean they don't allow farming in Langley. Let's face it, that's an academic question. But I did want to ask you, we do have federal land, provincial lands, and some of our own land. Is there, looking at how to start a farm and also promoting young agrarians, is there ever an opportunity for you to get in either lease or use some of the land that's owned by non-private folk, for you to get your young farmers and farmers people to get out farming? Is there ever that opportunity, if I may?
That's a tough one there too. I mean, that's one of those things we can take back when we do meet again as a question to see if it's something that is possible.
Because you always have to explore opportunities for farming, because the land is so expensive. A young farmer can't just go out and pay exorbitant prices for farmland and also farm it as well, knowing costs of farm equipment and everything else, servicing. So yeah, take that back, but what you're doing is the right thing. Langley is, believe it or not, an agricultural community, and we have to keep reminding those folks that live in urban areas, yes, we are. And I think it's starting to work. I think people do realize that, and that's what they appreciate in Langley. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. And just before you go, I just want to say there's 2 sides to farming. One is producing fantastic crops,
Yes.
and the other is getting paid for it. And I appreciate that you have two A's there and number 7, but my soapbox has always been at every meeting I go to that unless we have some teeth in our province to prevent or to support our local agriculture first before we bring in produce from California, Mexico that's produced, is put in a box cheaper. It's costs more money for some of our growers to put it in a box here than it is for them to dump it. They basically dump it and without other levels of government coming to the aid of agriculture, that's going to continue, and it's hurt our agriculture. Farmers in Delta who can't grow beautiful land there can't grow because they can't sell it, and that's one of the biggest problems. And so I appreciate that you're encouraging ways to get the word out, but I think you need to also work with the Ministry of Agriculture and other organizations to get our food on our tables in our province, and that's my biggest soapbox I've been saying for 11 years, and I think you know it.
I'll make sure everybody gets the link to sign up with Eat Local Challenge for Lang Meats Local.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I appreciate the work you're doing, and first we have to produce good food, but we need a willing market to buy it.
Exactly.
Support the local, yeah.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. I know I'd get to say that again one more time in my term as mayor. Reports to council. So we have quite a busy agenda. So I know we have a lot of reports here. So I'm going to ask we can move through this, and councillors just be succinct with your questions. That's my plea to move through this extensive agenda. Councillor Richter had a question.
Oh, that was for E1.
Okay, so we'll start with E1 then. Thank you. I'll leave you on just once we get it going. So E1 is 2022 external grant funding adjustments, and there's a report there. I'll ask for a motion. I'll move it. Councillor Long and Councillor Davis seconds it. Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, this is wonderful news that we're accessing more grant money to the tune of needing to adjust budget envelopes. But my question is, do these new grant monies necessitate increased Township of Langley spending that wasn't planned for?
Backen?
No, Your Worship. This is actually because of our success. It's a good question, but it's representing the fact that traditionally we haven't received this volume of grant money. So now that we have it, we're having to adjust our envelopes to fit within the budget parameters. So it doesn't necessitate new spending, and if it did require that, it would have to come to council as part of the budget process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any further questions. I'm going to call the question on E1. Carries unanimously. Move on to E2, and this is the discharge of covenant and expansion of Fraser sewage area affecting 1361 200 Street. And a motion, Councillor Davis, and a seconder, Councillor Kunst and Councillor Richter.
Yes, I have a question around this with regards to will the discharge of this covenant result in an increase in the number of residents? Are we talking about RU zoning in this particular area? And is the owner of this particular property that's affected here planning to add an additional residence? And then my subsequent question to that is, how many properties like this are going to be affected? And will they all be adding a new residence or doubling the number of residences?
Mr. Seffi?
Your Worship, this is actually coming to council because of the regional growth strategy and the structure, the regulatory framework around the RGS. The report actually outlines the previous regime that was in place that required the registration of a covenant on title that would restrict the area that would be allowed to be part of the sewage area to be the existing footprint of a building. The current regional growth strategy doesn't require that. So the owners, and there are not that many of them, there's only a handful that were approved based on the previous regime. One of them has come forward and said that they wish to have the covenant discharged such that the entire property is actually part of the Fraser sewage catchment area. That said, Your Worship, it is noteworthy that the property is actually located in the ALR. There are no plans for the township or for the region to allow further growth, nor is the owner interested in doing a sort of a development, if you will, but rather allowing for expansions to the existing building, whether it's a patio or whether it's an extension or accessory building based on the existing zoning permission. They wish to have the covenant discharged, and Metro Vancouver requires that process to go through council.
Okay, and then my follow-up question is Metro Vancouver aware of Township of Langley RU zoning implications? And by that, I mean RU zoning permits 2 residences on a property. So that means that Metro, if they're going to discharge these covenants on any RU zone property, would be actually doubling the amount of service they have to provide.
Your Worship, I cannot be specific, but I can confirm to Council that the zoning, the Township of Langley's historic zoning bylaw provisions have come up in our discussions with Metro Vancouver in the past. So I would assume that they are aware of the regulatory framework that we have in the township. And that said, just another, I guess, point of clarification, with properties located in the ALR, there is no entitlement unless the Agricultural Land Commission deems the second dwelling to be in, I guess, support of agriculture. So there are thresholds and there are requirements for procedural approvals from the ALC before a second dwelling can be constructed in the ALR lands.
Okay, so if we pass this today, it's going to go on to Metro to make the final decision?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Arneson? Hang on.
That's okay. Thank you, Worship. I guess through your Worship to Mr. Safey, I did have a question after reading this report, and I wondered if you could succinctly tell us what the original rationale was for this covenant. My understanding would be it is kind of unusual. It's a bit of an anomaly because generally if you have zoning that would allow, if it's RU zoning, to houses, then this seems to have been a desire to restrict development at one time, to make them sign this covenant, which basically, once it's removed, allows the underlying zoning to take effect.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the, I guess, the implication that staff can read into Metro Vancouver thinking in terms of, what prompts them to put forward, I guess, policy provisions. I can only suggest that it's to do with the level of control that the region needs to have in terms of sizing of major sewage treatment facilities, etc. That said, I think there needs to be an understanding, and I think the region has come to this understanding, that I guess need for certainty in terms of how much the various regional facilities need to be anticipating to expand in the future has to come in at a bit of a balance in terms of what existing property rights are. So as an example, if we have say a manufactured home park that has a restriction that only allows the footprint of existing temporary homes to be part of the sewage catchment area, if one home was to be relocated to another part of the site, technically it would be outside the Fraser sewage catchment area. So there's this balance between practicality and I guess certainty that the region has come to realize is important.
Thank you. And I know it's not the intention of the report to discuss water, but I think it's germane to talk about the water because is this deriving water from a municipal well in the Township of Langley? Will they ever have access to at least blended water in this locale?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Arneson, I guess the property is in the ALR, so they're not required to connect to the municipal water system. But that said, there is a water main that fronts the property, so I am not aware of the specifics of this parcel in terms of whether they have an existing connection to the municipal water system or not. But there is a water system based on my recollection of what has happened in the past number of decades in the area, that there is a water main that fronts the property on 200 Street.
Okay, thank you, because that is, to me important in terms of our discussions, particularly today around water. And I guess my final question is further to Councillor Richter's inquiry with respect to what kind of precedent this is. And you're suggesting that this is very limited in this area, that we don't have very many of these properties necessarily that would be able to put, because it effectively then, if it was to replicate what we have ongoing here, would mean that all of those could potentially double their density by putting another house on it if they had the same zoning and the same kind of contract that they could remove. Is that correct?
Very limited indeed. Yes, there are, as you can see on the slide here, these are the areas that were historically a few years back approved by council to be extended to GVRD for expansion of the Fraser sewage area that were limited to the footprint of the existing building. Only one owner, to my knowledge, has taken advantage of that process, and that's the subject property.
And then just by default, the end result is if we didn't endorse this, that they would just be stuck basically with what they have as the existing contract. Because a covenant runs, as far as I know, with the land in perpetuity unless it's extinguished.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yes, thank you. If I may, through the chair, I believe this is not the first I know they're very odd that come to our committee and the Liquid Waste Committee at Metro. There was another property, not about a year ago, if I may, through the chair, it was same corridor that applied for a discharge or an extension to the sewer area, if I may, through the chair.
Giuseppe?
You might not remember.
No, I think there's
Okay,
different properties that have applied for inclusion. I don't recall one discharge of the covenant.
Okay, all I know that it will come to, as you know, Mr. Mayor, both Metro and the committee work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll call the question on E2. Carries. Councillor Arneson opposed. Move on to E3. This is a report on school and playground zones. There is it's a very in-depth report, and appreciate all the work that's been put into it, and the comparisons, and there's a recommendation there. But I think what we'll do right now is, because it's so complex, I'll go to council if they have any questions regarding the report, and then we'll go to motion. So, Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the report. So my question actually is, would these playground zones be enforced through the summer? And when does that, how would that work? Through your worship, staff.
Perhaps Mr. Sevi could give an overview, and then as part of that include the answer to the question.
Thank you, Your Worship and Mr. Backen. The overview is that this was referred to staff by council as a result of a delegation to council. It deals with school zones and roads fronting schools. The original referral or the delegation to council was for schools as well as playground zones. Upon research and investigation, staff determined that the Motor Vehicle Act in the province of BC precludes a local government from instituting regulations that affect playgrounds that is contrary to the Motor Vehicle Act. However, it does allow local governments to adjust the hours of effectiveness of signage fronting schools, on roads fronting schools, as long as it is no less than 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So with that, staff have put forward a set of, I guess, approaches, if you will, a set of options, policy provisions, if you will, to go forward, which deals with schools that, or roads fronting schools that already have or plan to have in the future traffic calming measures implemented. The reason for that is, or at least part of the reason for that is because of, I think, what Councillor Kunst is referring to, which is enforcement. We believe that it is quite important, in fact critical, for such measures to be effective, for them to be in collaboration, in conjunction with other measures, such as physical barriers that actually reduce speed, which are in the form of traffic calming, subject to a bit of a process that council is aware of. So with that in mind, staff is recommending that council consider setting aside in the annual budget $100,000, I believe it is, yes, going forward from 2023 onwards, such that we can do a number of things, including retrofitting existing signage to state that it's 24 hours a day on school days, and also to go towards traffic calming or implementation of traffic calming. And a bit more specifically, I guess, in terms of, again, the question that Councillor Kunz was asking, during the summer, there would have to be a liaison discussion, which is ongoing, between the township and the school district to determine which schools are actually operating through the summer, and make sure that the signage fronting such schools is reflective of whether the school is in operation or not.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yes. I wanted to know if we could drop on school days, because it seems to me that children use the playgrounds around the schools when there is no school, and during summer holidays and so on. So is there any reason why we can't just say 24 hours a day, 365 days a year?
Your Worship, I understand that that's a provision of the Motor Vehicle Act, and as such, we have no discretion in terms of the wording. It is something that we had thought of and that we had considered, but based on the provincial legislation, we are unable to amend or revise.
Okay, so why is it that with this one, we can do 24 hours a day on school days, but with the following one, it's basically 8 until 5 on school days? Like, there seems to be an inconsistency between the two.
Your Worship, if I understand Councillor Richter correctly, the reference is to the subsequent report, Report E4.
Yeah.
So with that one, Your Worship, again, this reference to that complication, if you will, in the report, in that there is an added layer of approval required if we are dealing with major road network roads, which are under the jurisdiction of TransLink. Because of the approval for the 216th road fronting Topham, predates this current E3. So E4 was directed, or staff started to work on that E4 prior to E3 coming onto the work program. And as such, the approval that staff had sought from TransLink did not include an extension of the signage beyond the 825. In other words, if we wanted to have the application of the signage to be 24 hours a day, we would have to go back to TransLink and request approval.
Okay, so I'll get back to that one then, and when we deal with E4. So what would be the effect of if we dropped on school days and we just left it in there to read, in effect, 24 hours a day? Would we be unable to enforce this, or would we have to make an appeal in order to keep it 24 hours a day?
It would be unenforceable. Because the Motor Vehicle Act would be supersede. I can give an example. Years ago in Vancouver, there was a playground sign in an area that wasn't, under the Motor Vehicle Act, fit the definition of playground, and it was unenforceable. We didn't enforce it because it was technically not a playground. So this would be contrary to the Motor Vehicle Act. So Mr. Seffi, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more.
That's exactly it, Your Worship. It would be, I think, what might be termed, I'm not a lawyer, but in terms of legal, I guess, verbiage, it might be what they call ultra vires, in that it will have no force and effect because it's contrary to the empowering legislation, which is the provincial legislation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just a question through to staff. I thought maybe I heard it expressed that on roads that we were able to do traffic calming in front of schools, that we could make this change to a 30-kilometer-hour speed zone on school days 24/7. Or no, not 24/7, 24 hours on school days. Is that, did I understand that correct, that it would only be roads in which we could do traffic calming? Or could it be any road in front of a school? Or are all roads in front of schools, do we apply traffic calming?
Your Worship, thank you for the question and the opportunity to clarify what was stated previously. There are no provincial regulations that prevent us from implementing that 24 hours per day on school day limitation on all roads fronting schools. What township staff are recommending is, in order for such signage to be effective, let's do it on roads that we have already implemented traffic calming, because we believe the signage alone do not necessarily be effective unless they're accompanied by other measures, some physical measures that actually require drivers to slow down. So hence the recommendation to do the signage in conjunction with traffic calming measures.
Okay, so I'm wondering, is it possible for us to do the 24-hour in front of all schools, and then look to those schools that don't have traffic calming for future traffic calming? Is that a possibility, rather than identifying only the schools that currently have traffic calming to put this 24-hour, 30-kilometer on?
Your Worship, so what staff is recommending is a continuation of what we have started in the past few years, which is on an annual basis setting aside some funding to go towards traffic calming. So with that in mind, then I guess it would be a matter of time before all of roads fronting schools that are eligible, in other words, they go through a process, because council, remember, has a policy that requires a bit of a petition process to make sure that the neighborhood around the school are in support of traffic calming measures. So assuming that is the case, over time, all of the schools will then be subject to the same treatment.
Okay, so that's helpful information. So it is possible for us to put this 30-kilometer-an-hour zone in front of all schools, and we recognize that those with traffic calming will be much more effective, but the rule could still be there. And then as the school gets their traffic calming, it would just help the drivers to stick with the 30. Is that correct, that we could still have it and it would just be a reminder, even though it might be not as easy to enforce or to maintain?
Yeah, so I think Mr. Steff is saying it can be done. We have the authority to do that. However, it may be impractical as far as enforcement. And the ones that have been identified for traffic calming already are identified as an area which require vehicles to slow down, so it would be much easier to enforce that. I think that's what the report is getting at, and that's why the staff are recommending it. Mr. Steffi, you have anything more to add?
That's correct, Your Worship. And in addition, just, I guess, a reminder that not all schools have a 30K zone. There are some schools that don't, because they have other physical barriers such as fencing, landscaping, etc. So that's why I hesitated earlier to actually have a blanket statement that said it would be on all schools. We have a procedural requirement for traffic calming, and then there's other sort of systematic or systemic measures that we need to keep in mind as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Davis? Oh, hang on. There we go.
Thank you very much. I think all my questions, I only actually had two of them, and the one is drop the school days, and I agree with dropping the school days so that nobody has to think, oh, is it Friday or is it Saturday or is it Sunday or is it a Pro D day? And the other question that was just brought up by Councillor Whitmarsh about where traffic calming measures are in place, and I think you've just explained that to me. But where there's, if we're doing things new, where there's a school, there's a playground. So it's like that's why it's important to drop, as Councillor Richter, because playgrounds, kids are always at playgrounds, and and so that's why. But how many schools do you think are we going to miss out here? We're not going to miss out on any, I guess. But how many do we have to catch up on without calming measures? Well, I guess it's pretty hard. Well, are we going to get half of them to drop the?
Yeah, there's a list, I think, of future calming based on budget.
But we shouldn't have to not change the speed limit just because there's no traffic calming there.
I don't know if Mr. Seffi can respond.
Well, again, Your Worship, the recommendation from staff is that we start implementing on the ones that already have traffic calming measures in place. This is more than a theoretical recommendation, if you will. This is actually a practical consideration because these things take time and financial resources. So whether we like it or not, we're going to have to go through a process of, say, 5 years to start implementing these on all schools. And what we're saying is let's start with those that have traffic calming front in them because that's what makes them more effective.
Yeah, okay. Okay, good points, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very good report. It's like a first step of many steps in the future, but it's a positive. I know that Councillor Davis and myself had been approached, I think, one of the residents, Miss Nash, regarding something, if I may through a chair, implemented in Alberta, I think Calgary. Now, they have a different Motor Vehicle Act than us, if I may through the chair to staff. Is that not the case, and we can only do as much as we can do under our BC Motor Vehicle Act, if I may?
That's correct.
That's correct. Yeah.
I just answered my own question. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thanks. So we've got a little clarity there. So the motion is, and after hearing that, I think this is a good start. It certainly addresses the schools that do have traffic calming and puts that speed in there. I don't know who can go through those traffic calming measures at 50 kilometers an hour. I certainly can't. Have to slow down anyway. So with that, if council wishes to put this motion forward on E3, Councillor Arneson, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. So on the motion, Councillor Richter on the.
Yes, I'd like to add an amendment to the motion.
Okay.
And the amendment would be that Township Council advocate to the provincial government to amend the BC Motor Vehicle Act to drop the school days requirement.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Richter, did you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, I mean, this is better than it is now, but it's still not what I think the community has been asking us for. And if we've got legal or jurisdictional boundaries based on this, we should at least try to see if we can move those boundaries in order to better meet the needs of our own community.
Okay, I don't see any further speakers, so I'll call a question on the amendment. Carries unanimously. So we're back to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on E3. Carries unanimously. Move on to E4, and this is regarding a specific school, Topham Elementary. And so I think Councillor Ferguson moved, second by Councillor Davis. Councillor Richter?
Yeah. This is the same situation. The community up there has clearly asked us time and again for these protective measures on the roads around the schools, and they've made it quite clear they want 24 hours a day. I recognize from the report that we have to now resubmit to TransLink to get it to go from from the TransLink requirement of 8 to 5 to 24 hours a day. So I would like to add an amendment to this motion after everyone's had a chance to speak to it that want to speak to it. An amendment to the motion that council asks staff to resubmit to TransLink asking for 24 hours a day.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Arneson. I'll come back to you. Councillor Arneson?
Thank you, Worship. I did have a question. I know the staff report refers to the different stakeholders, and it includes the school district. But I'm wondering, as I was part of the Topham School Safe Travel Plan, which had a number of different individuals, including the school district, but I'm wondering if there's been an attempt to try and match up some of the recommendations from that specific plan in order to make it align as much as possible with what the recommendations are in this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go back to Councillor Richter. Let me get your mic on. Here we go. Go ahead, Councillor.
Okay, so my amendment is to add that council asks staff to resubmit the application to TransLink to revise the hours to 24/7, or 24 hours per day.
Okay, so I'll just get some clarity from the clerk. This could be a referral motion back, for this motion back to staff to seek that clarity and then bring it back to us. Is that? Or we just go ahead with this and then ask to increase it?
Well, the report says we have to resubmit.
Yeah.
Now, while it's being
That's right.
resubmitted, let's go ahead and get the signs up, but
Okay.
I still
Yeah,
think
okay,
we
that's
need
fine.
to
Fair enough.
resubmit.
My understanding is this is an and, not
That's
an
right.
or.
Sounds good. I just want to get that clarity. Thanks. Okay, so that's been moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Arneson seconds it. So on the amendment, any discussion? Councillor Long?
Yeah, let's be clear then, because we're messing around with these reports. I want to make sure that staff are going to confirm, as it says here, that we're going to get on with this, because it says, let's proceed and get it going, and the staff are going to proceed with implementation right away. So
Yeah,
this is not going to stop that? I mean, or are we going to have to make two sets of signs? It's probably going to cost more now, because the signs we're going to put up now are going to say 8 to 5, or do we even have signs that give the time?
So this would be, the amendment would be standalone, so this would still proceed. If the amendment carries, then the main motion, if that carries, would still proceed. Yeah, staff would have to make a couple of different signs, so the cost.
Because my understanding is that if we do this now, which is what was being suggested by staff, it'll be in place by the fall, which is when school goes back in, or even sooner.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. So on the amendment, I'm going to call the question. Carries unanimously. So on the main motion as amended, so no further comments, so call the question. Carries unanimously. Move on to E5. This is the Brookswood Furnished Neighborhood Plan, Phase 3 summary, and good report on the public input and to date. This is a report for receipt. Can I have a motion for receipt? Councilor Davis, second by Councilor Whitmarsh. Any questions? Councilor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. I do see that we have staff here today. I'm not sure if I have specific questions to ask about this, but more by way of comment. And I guess my broadest possible comment is that based on the data in the report, I'm actually at this point, prior to receiving these draft plans, concerned about what is indicated in the report about the community support for many of these options that are here. And I don't know how to gauge this. I know that there's a broad range of how we put weight on, who's indicating support or not, et cetera. But the one number that leapt out to me was like 26%. 100% supported something, and I can compare that, to other kinds of community support for other initiatives. So that leads me to think that, at least at a very high level, I think one of the challenges going forward with this is that despite all the engagement that's happened so far, that it's now culminating in a plan where people see the whole thing together. And I do wonder, and I can ask a question, whether or not we know through staff if there is any money left in our engagement process to have a sort of a final run through of this, because my concern is that in trying to initiate a community plan, the community has to be in support of the plan, and I'm challenged by currently what we're seeing here and think it could be aided by having yet another complementary opportunity that puts everything together in this package. Because if you showed me something and it's a series of snapshots, I might not get the entire picture until you show me the masterpiece at the end. So what I'm hoping is that there could be some money left in the budget and a timeline for us to be able to do that, because I personally do think it's important to bring the community along. This is a very innovative plan that we have. It's very it's very timely, but it is, I'll call it a departure from a lot of other planning models that we have. So I'm just wondering if that could be something we could consider. Thank you.
Mr. Sefi, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, I don't think, Mr. Nelson, I don't think we need to have you comment at this point unless I'm unable to satisfy council. I'll take a stab. Your worship, there's always, I guess, the potential to do more. I believe the current plans that are available, should council decide to move forward with them, are rooted in the Brookswood Community Plan. So with that, I think this council and the previous council are aware of the extent to which community consultation has occurred, and I guess the nature of neighborhood plans being that you will never have 100% support for anything. In fact, it's not just neighborhood plans; it's just a function of our society. On anything, we are hard pressed to see 100% support for anything. So with that in mind, I think it's less of a question of whether there's funding, but more of a desire of council and what the objective would be. Whether council believes that there is still more to be done, if in fact it is a question of making sure that the public is understanding of what the vision is. That could be done concurrently with the plans being adopted, or at least considered for initial readings, and could be part of the public hearing process moving forward. As council is aware, again, the plan is not a major departure from the Brookswood Furnished Community Plan that was the subject of extensive community consultation. It is in fact quite harmonious with that community plan. It does create some controversial issues in the community, such as this 26%. Should be more, should be less, but the 26% is actually consistent with the recommendations of the Tree Protection Advisory Committee, which council endorsed in terms of retention of a tree canopy. So depending on who you speak with, there may be some resistance to it, there may be some support, but I don't know if more engagement, more public consultation will get us to an ideal 100% support.
So just one follow-up question. I think for me, part of what was missing from this report, not that we had a concrete amount of information to be contained here, but I think just focusing on the 26%, I understand the scientific rationale. I completely understand that, and we've gone through TPAC, a review, so I think that there is a common support for this. But what I don't see here is how this translates into the concern about affordability. I think it's very clear from the feedback we've been getting that there is some concern or not understanding how this is going to be handled. And I don't see any empirical information that suggests to people, for example, and it seems rather straightforward, if you have 5 acres and this is what your zoning is, this is what you could have. This could be your yield on your property based on the formula that we've created. I think it could be that simple. So I'm not saying we need to have sort of an elaborate, let's all go back now and regurgitate the plan, but I think that there would be some helpfulness in having more of a concrete understanding of the formula and what that looks like when you actually apply it as a template to the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Yeah, well, the recommendation is very, mild in a way. It just says, let's receive this report. But of course, a little bit further down on the second page, it says, well, based on community input, the NPs have been revised and are ready to be presented to council. Now, timing is everything. And of course, in council's wisdom or lack thereof, there won't be very many more meetings in this term. So how can we possibly even deal with this? So maybe through your worship, staff can explain what is going to happen here. Is this thing's going to be put in the cellar until next year, or what? And what'll happen to changes that could occur in the world and everything else in the meantime? So anyway, what is the timing proposal that staff's offering, or is there any?
Mr. Backham.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is only one more meeting effectively for this term. So what we're looking for here is, does council have any direction? And failing that, if it's simply received, we'll bring it back probably November or December as part of the then work plan, probably a priority session with then council, and then slot it in. And they, from that process, may give further direction, which could be to bring it forward or to revise it, to go through another process, whatever may happen at that point.
So then, can I say that an amendment would be to bring first and second reading today? Or how do we move on to that, to a position where it can be dealt with this term?
Well, to bring it to a conclusive conclusion, I think would be virtually impossible. If it was to get first and second tonight, or even in the next meeting, there still needs to be a public hearing, then final adoption. So you're looking at another couple of meetings in the very best case. And I'm suggesting that this may not be the most opportune time to try to accelerate that through. I think it could be quite divisive at this point. I think it's something that we've heard has made a lot of progress, but needs to continue down a path of trying to deal with the issues that are being brought forward.
So in other words, it's the recommendation is what stands, and to do anything other than that would have to be, other meetings would have to be called, and that would likely be in September, which is getting too close to the election, and so forth.
And I think also the scheduling of a public hearing through summer has always been challenging.
You couldn't
so-
have a public hearing until September either.
Yeah.
Well, it's a real shame.
Yeah, it's Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I don't think we're at a position to be able to give it first and second tonight, and I would vote against that. As Councillor Arneson has mentioned, if you just go to the chart on page 37, only 52% of the participants support this plan, 52. And of that, 17% completely or mostly support it, 35% somewhat support it, and 32% don't support it at all. So I think there is still work that needs to be done. I'm not sure how or what, but if there are additional monies in the consultation budget, as Councillor Arneson has referenced, maybe we should be using those to try to reach out and get more input. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Well, there is in E5, which is what we're looking at right now, a picture of a horse, a pig, and a chicken. And I was wondering, I've written on where are we at with the Brookswood Fern Ridge neighborhood plan. There's a little bit of humor here. First of all, I want to thank staff, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Chu, for the hours and hours of time you and your group put into this. It's certainly not an easy process. You've been tasked with a huge challenge. I guess on our first term, that's in 2018, we, somewhere in that first year, we said, can it be done in 18 months? A neighborhood plan, a task force, working group, and Mr. Mayor, I suppose you've thanked the members of the group. I hope you have, and if not, I'm sure the staff have, for the time, energy, and effort that task force working groups put in. Then bang, COVID hits, and our 18 months get kind of gobbled up, and we're caught struggling with now a community plan that we've been kind of waiting for 8 years, and no fault of anyone. It's just a number of things have happened, and I guess affordability of housing would be different 8 years ago than it would be today, and we all know the challenges of that. So as much as I'm disappointed that we haven't been able to deal with it this term, I understand that there is not enough time left in this term to go through the necessary, number one, first and second reading, number two, public hearing, number three, third reading, and the necessary amendments or changes thereof. That's how government and governance works. But my question to staff would be, what would you wish us to do with this report today, if I may, through the chair?
I think Mr. Backen can respond, but I know one of the options that Mr. Backen said, we could amend to bring it back in the fall, but I think staff would bring it back in the fall regardless. But Mr. Backen.
Well, that's correct, Your Worship. The recommendation is to receive. If Council has specific direction, one illustration was, well, let's bring it for first and second at the next meeting of Council, with direction as to when the rest would occur. That would be one option. The other is to provide some terms for the receipt, which would be to bring it back, that we're going to bring back anyways. We think that the most prudent thing is simply to receive the report at this point, and we'll frame it as part of the next cycle's work plan.
Okay, if I may, just a supplemental, Mr. Backen or Mr. Safey, would it not be, how we prioritize things at beginning of term, to place this on the highest level of priority on those people that run and get elected, new mayor and council and everything else, to put that and have a high-level working group to work through this plan and see what can work, what doesn't work, what there's more public need or public information consultation needed, and to sit and work through this thing so that you have a document that you can present for first and second reading with the necessary changes, if changes are needed, if I may through a chair for that.
Your worship, it's actually a bit of a difficult question because it's actually making a suggestion to a future council, and that mere suggestion may actually put the recommendation in either a positive light or a negative light. It depends very much on who forms that council and what the policy issues that they've been successful in achieving are. So I leave it to council, but I'd be cautious in trying to do too much at this point, only because it may be looked upon positively, but it also could be looked upon negatively in terms of what the future council may be facing.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, I appreciate those comments. My suggestion is every document and every time we have a planning session, we used to have a facilitator or something, and it usually works out very, very positive. I mean, this is an important document and it shouldn't be taken lightly. And that whoever ends up going forward in the future, I think it's important to note that the necessary steps have to be taken. And I want to thank staff again for their contribution and work done on this report.
Thank you. Councilor Whitmarsh.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this plan and discussion on the neighborhood plans has been going on for many, many years. I can't think, at least in my term, where we've had maybe more public input on anything in my 8 years of being on council than this. It's been going on since we started with the official community plan, public input. So really, we've been having input on this area of our community, quite consistent input, probably since maybe around 2010 or 11, as we started even building for the 2014 update. So, which didn't pass, and then it came through and passed in 17. So really, there's been probably almost 10 years of public consultation on this area of the community, more significant than I have seen any other project. All kinds of small groups, large groups, online, all kinds of places where this has happened. In addition to that, we've had council refer this to things like the TPAC, which has given significant input as of late. So I'm not sure if we need another round of public input after 10 years of input on this particular area. But I do agree that this is probably something that should be put onto the work plan of the next council, discussed at the council priority session that happens at the beginning of every term, and so that council can decide how they'd like to move forward. But I certainly would like to see this prioritized. I certainly think it should be part of the next work plan. But for now, I think we should just receive this and have it move forward onto the next work plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Long.
Well, if we're going to proceed, we need to proceed. And I think I'd like to make the motion just to see where people are going to stand, that this be brought back at the next meeting for first and second. So moved. So that would be an addition, an amendment to the recommendation.
To receive the report and then, well, let's.
And for staff to bring it back for first and second.
We could do it in two parts. We could do a receipt motion, we could call the question on the receipt, and then entertain any subsequent motions. So I think we'll do that just to keep it clean. So I'm going to call the question on the receipt first. It's been moved and seconded, I'd have to ask.
It was Councillor Whitmarsh that seconded.
Okay, thanks. So on receipt, calling the question. Yes, on receipt. Carries unanimously. Okay. We're all clear of that. Councillor Long, you're still on.
Yeah, so I make that motion that staff bring it back for first and second reading at the next meeting.
Okay. And do you wish to speak?
Well, it's a motion, so someone has to second it.
Hang on. Let me run the meeting here. Unless you have a point of order that's pertinent to putting a motion on the floor, I'm not sure what that would be. I'll ask for a seconder. Councillor Davis seconds it. Councillor Long. Okay, what's your point of order? Just.
Knowing that there is not enough days or council meetings in this term to proceed.
Yes, this motion is appropriate. The council also has the option to start jamming in more meetings if they wanted. So yeah, I'm just saying I do. Okay, thanks. Councillor Long, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Okay. There was a few of us that attended the LMLGA, the Lower Mainland Local Government Association. I think there's a couple of councillors on that end of the table that went. And there was a presentation given at the end by Andrea Reimer about how ideas get through to completion, and they're in this particular incubating stage and then the public consultation stage, and they have to move around in some kind of continuum. And it's been mentioned here that this plan has been circulating for years and years and years. Now, I know that there's details and there's different opinions and it's a very complicated plan, but I mean, it has to keep moving. Otherwise, it goes back and becomes stagnant. Someone said 10 years. I think it's a lot longer than that, because we actually had this in front of this council, not this council, but in front of council 3 terms ago, and it was just about going to get first and second, and somebody on that end of the table said, well, we should send it back for public consultation for some more, for whatever reason, and that's when things started to fall apart, in my opinion. So in order to keep things moving, we need to light a fire here somewhere. And it's very clearly indicated in this report that everything has been done and it's ready to present. What happens at the next meeting, I don't know. I guess we'll have to find out if we call other meetings, or maybe that's the first order of business for the new council, will be to have a public hearing on it. But if we don't keep moving on it, my fear is it's going to slip back and go nowhere. And it certainly hasn't gone very far in the last 15 years. Lots of work's been done, and I laud everybody that's put input, and that's terrific, and hopefully the plan is that much better. But we need to get it out there. We need to have these communities completed, and all I can do at this point, at the end of this term, is to do my very best to move things forward, and that's why I made the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
I don't know where this 10-year business is coming from, because this whole idea of 3 neighborhood plans was fast-tracked 4 years ago. Never before did we talk about doing 3 neighborhood plans at once. This is the first time we've ever done this, and there has been work done on public engagement, but the chart on page 37 that says overall support for this plan is 52%. is not exactly leaving me with the idea that we've got this one right yet. I also think this council has only 1 more meeting left to give first and second at the next meeting. And then what does it do? It sits in limbo until November when the new council is sworn in. And what happens if council doesn't give it first and second at the next meeting? Then the work of the last 4 years is down the drain. Like, I think this motion that Councillor Long has made is premature, and I will not be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Davis?
Yeah, I second it, just because I wanted just to clarify. Like, I'm not afraid to move things along and to do my job, but staff has clearly recommended that, well, no recommendations from staff, but they've said it's tight. We got summer. We're going to come back. If we move it along, and it's going to, the next meeting. The last thing I think I want to support is a neighborhood. This report. Why not let the next council pick it up in November? And a lot of work has been done. They only have to work on the They only have to work on the neighborhood plan, and they're going to move it along. It has to be moved on. It's not going to. I don't think we're going to lose it. But I'm concerned that last meeting of the year, I've heard that a few times at this table, and I kind of don't like that. The pushing things through. So I won't support the amendment. We've received it. It's not like I know exactly where it's going to go. It's going to go on the desk at the 4th floor there, and it's not going to leave that desk till it's dealt with. So it's not like we're going to lose anything. So that's why I don't think it's wise to do this. I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson? Oh, hang on. Sorry, I'm half asleep.
Gotta look for the light.
I'm asleep at the switch, put it that way.
Only 2 more meeting. I can't support this either. If there's anything that I think we shouldn't put ourselves up against, and with all due respect to our staff who's put the report together and done such an extraordinary amount of work for this project. All kudos to that process, all kudos to all the work, all the engagement, etc. It seems to do a terrible disservice to this if we try and shoehorn it in to the last meeting, basically, of a council that's in what I call its dying embers. One way or another, the constituents of our council are going to be different next time. And if there's one thing that I don't think we should be tagged with, it's this idea that in July, we are now moving forward with a plan. I don't see anything where it looks like it's going to explode or go into a black hole or something terrible is going to happen to the plan if we just simply delay it, because I would far rather delay it so that the new council can start working on it than I would rather have, casting aspersions on basically all of this work to say, oh, well, it was only done just to get it through, and, so that it didn't become some political football or whatever. I think that it deserves so much more than that, and I do think it would benefit from just some other type of communication or understanding. It is so important to bring the community along with what we're doing. I think about Copernicus, and probably nobody else thinks about him. Somebody who comes up with a model and says, this is the way the world should work, and everybody goes, oh, well, we've never done that before, so we don't think that's the way the universe operates. Well, actually, it's very difficult to bring the public along to some newer ideas, but they are strategic, and they, if I can just remind Council, are ideas that have come forward way after the fact, when we've had this idea about how many decades we've talked about this plan. Our climate action strategy came forward in 2019 and was endorsed. This is only 2 years off of this assessment of what we need to do for our communities. This is a unique community. This is an area that we've been told repeatedly by the population in particular that lives there, we don't want to have a Willoughby. This is why we have a different plan, but it's so important to have the community on board with this. And I'm just really encouraging Council not to see this as a potential slam dunk to say, yeah, we did it, but rather to look at it and say, you know what, we deliberated, we did the best job that we could, because I don't want to have a bunch of amendments after the fact. That's my biggest concern. Thank you.
Councillor Woodward?
I think City Manager, Mr. Backen, outlined pretty clearly that unless we're going to start calling additional meetings in July, August, and September, that there's not enough meetings in the calendar to get this done. Councillor Long knows that. So I view this as nothing more than silliness, so I won't support it. Thanks.
That's okay. Well, I want to speak to it too. I don't see this as silliness. I see this as Councillor Long certainly expressing that we started this. It'd be nice to finish it. The COVID came along and kind of put a slowdown on it that we did not expect. I think 3.5 years ago, this council didn't expect that this would be on our desk in the second to last meeting of our council. I look back to 2011 when I was first elected. There was a process already in play to update the official community plan, and I didn't expect that to take 7 years to do or 6 years to do. It took 6 years, and then we went ahead to do these neighborhood plans, which follows closely on the heels of an official community plan. And then several things got in the way of that, being COVID. So as much as I'd love to see this proceed, I was certainly hoping that by end of this term we would have this buttoned away, that we wouldn't have to burden another council with this. A lot of work has been done. Staff have done a fantastic job in reaching out to the community. Brookswood started off the whole process in getting a public engagement charter for the Township of Langley, and so we certainly have tried to fulfill as best we can to ensure everybody is aware. We'll never have everybody 100%. I think council's job here is we try and come up with the best compromise possible, and that never makes anybody happy. But that's council's job, unfortunately, is to work through all the data, work through all the information, and then make an informed decision that hopefully satisfies the largest amount of people. But the nature of our job is that too often it's a compromise and nobody's happy. So it's not enough for one, there's too much for the other, or vice versa. So I won't be supporting this because I do believe this tank of gas has basically run out, and that there's just not enough time to give this proper readings and proper due diligence for council to make the decision prior to the election. And I hate to pass the buck to the next council, but I believe it's going to be the next council that's going to take a look at this, look at all of the work that's been done, and then make their decision on what more has to be done, if anything, or to proceed with the process. So I do want to thank Councillor Long. I know his frustration. We've worked long and hard on this together. For me, it's been 11 years. I would like to have seen this thing put to bed. I would never have believed 11 years ago that it takes this long to do a neighborhood plan, a fiscal committee plan. But government wheels roll very slowly. And yet we're trying to do the best for our residents. So that's my reasons. I think it's a noble effort to move this through. I agree with it, but I just know that this tank is on empty, and we have to let the next council do its work. So I'm going to go. Councillor Ferguson hasn't spoken yet. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Be brief, because I don't want to repeat what you said. You did an excellent summary of where we're at. I'm looking at my list with Councillor Richter Davis, Arneson, Woodward, and yourself, and now myself. I'm not going to support it. That's why I called the point of order regarding procedurally. It's a motion originally for information, and I think it's a document that needs some work, and usually that work happens at third reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Yeah, let me just summarize here. First of all, the report clearly says that its staff have finished with it. It's ready for council to consider. That's the intent of my motion. I think that this council, all councils need to support the work of their staff, the hours and that were put in by them and all of the committees and advisory groups. So in so making this motion, I think I'm trying to give kudos to the work that they've done and say, hey, we appreciate what you've done and we're ready to move forward. Now, what's sad, not really silly, but very sad, is that the council has boxed themselves in by canceling all these meetings. I happened to run into Mayor Braun from Abbotsford on the way to the FCM a couple of weeks ago. They have 8 more meetings until the election. In fact, they have 1 meeting after the election. Why? Because in their mind, the job is to do the work of the council, to do the work of the community, to entertain and look at the reports that have been produced and to make decisions on them. So we have this other concept here that we can't do that apparently. So I already spoke about that when the motion to cancel the meetings was made, and I was very much opposed to that. We could have set other meetings in September. Certainly wouldn't want to have a public hearing in the middle of the summer. There is time to do it if there was a will of this council, but I can clearly see there isn't. But I don't want to rub it in. I just want to say that I feel good about making the motion. It'll do what it has to do. But the motion was made to applaud staff and the community and all the working groups and advisory groups that put effort into this plan, and I sure hope that it will see the light of day when it's time, and we'll be able to proceed.
Thank you.
Somebody will.
All right, so I'm going to call the question on the motion. And the motion fails, with Councillor Long voting in favor. Thank you.
Want to take a quick break, 3 o'clock?
Oh, sure, if you want.
All right.
Take 5? 5, okay. See you back at 3:10. So I'll give you 7. Generous.
Which surprised me, because I thought we could squeeze another one.
Well, I think that
Just refer the delegation.
Well, you lose so much. Because, like I say, keep on the lawn. It's unfortunate.
well, no, but when you put your name in, is 20 days prior to that. And that's
Yeah, he's sure gonna put it, that's, he's complaining.
You guys have to fix it.
thinking not, I don't know. It's hard to say. Every election, anyhow, elections in the last 5 minutes. So. Yeah, there's a, Bob's mic's on.
All right. Well, losing people fast. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. How you doing? All right, if we could take our seats, please. Okay. What am I missing?
Henry says they have a meeting on October 17th.
All right, if we could get everyone back down to their seats, please. 1, 2, 3.
She looked great. And how's Denise? Did she?
Councillor Davis, we're missing.
Yeah, he might be a while because he was limping to the back.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We have to go open the doors for him. That might speed him up half an hour.
All right.
Should I go check? I'll go check.
Just go. Yeah, we'll give Councillor Davis a minute because of his. Oh. Bring it. Yeah, Councillor Davis, some of us, we talk about our old football injuries. You can talk about your new football injury. I'm kind of jealous.
Well, you could have gone and kicked it yourself.
I could have. All right, we will now reconvene the Township of Langley Council meeting. And the next item on the agenda is E6, Agricultural Land Commission, application number 100406, Thunderbird Legacy Holdings. Councillor Kuntz moves it. Is there a seconder? Councillor Arneson seconds it. I see no discussion. I'll call the question on E6. Carries unanimously. All right, we move on to E7, Fraser Highway widening budget transfer. Mr. Seffi, do you have just a little background on that? I don't know, it might help with a little bit of explanation. I think there's a good news in here somewhere.
Thank you, Your Worship. The good news is that even though the tenders for the subject project, which is Fraser Highway widening, 24600 block, going to up to about 24900 block, even though the tenders that have come in have exceeded the available budget, staff have identified a number of projects where transfers, subject to council's approval, could be made to allow the project to continue and take advantage of the TransLink funding, external funding sources that we have available to us.
Thank you. All right. Councillor Richter, do you have a question for Mr. Seffi?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and I'm very glad that we're proceeding with Fraser Highway because it desperately needs work. But what is not going to get done with this 3.6 million transfer?
Your Worship, thank you for the question. I guess the answer is nothing is not going to get done. In other words, everything is going to be completed based on the fact that there has been, as I said earlier, a number of projects that have concluded or are anticipated to be able to be concluded within the existing budget framework, budget envelope, that there is funding available that can be transferred subject to council's approval.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Long?
Yeah, there was some interesting diagrams that I don't think they're in my package, are they? Those renderings?
These are, I had them as slides, Councillor Long, through you, Your Worship, just in case Council has some questions about the scope of the work, what is actually being proposed, utilizing, as I said, funding, multi-year funding from TransLink, because what we're seeing now, as opposed to a couple of years ago, is a significant increase to historic budgets. In the region of about 25% to 30% increase. So this is the scope of the project along Fraser Highway. It does include some.
Is that 248th here?
This is 248, and this is some cross sections showing council the extent of some retaining walls that have to be constructed and utility coordination and drainage works. There's significant works that have to be done, hence the costs.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Okay, could I have a motion for E7? Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. Call the question on E7. That carries unanimously. We move on to E8, Operations Center Staff Parking, and this is to endorse the concept of creation of a Township of Langley Public Works Satellite Yard. Councillor Ferguson moves, Councillor Kuntz seconds, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I have some questions here around the costs. Now, in 2019, we were cited a cost of 31 to 41 million for a new or satellite operations yard. And that was 2019. Now, we know from recent purchases and so on that industrial land is going at 8 million an acre. It may be assessed at 4 million an acre, but it's actually selling for 8+ million an acre. And that this satellite yard would require 8 acres. Now, Does this mean it's going to require 8 acres of industrial zone land? And if yes, then the budget just for land has gone to 64 million. So this is going to be quite a significant expense. So that's my first question. My second question, the trees that were removed in the Murrayville Park, are they being replanted?
Mr. Safi?
Thank you, Your Worship. In terms of the costs, as Councillor Richter has identified, those costs were presented in 2019, and if not increased, then certainly there's been I guess, a sufficient time lapse to assume that there's going to be a change to those costs, even though they were estimates at a very high level. That said, I don't know if we could necessarily, I guess, suggest that we need industrial lands as long as council's amenable to proceeding with something that could be as I guess, small of an area as 5 acres. 8 acres was identified as something that might be ideal, but we could start with something smaller that is not necessarily identified or designated as industrial, because municipal operations can occur in any zone. So it would be something that we could take advantage of if we do have council's endorsement and seek opportunities of lands that are reasonably priced, reasonably located in the appropriate area, and unencumbered by water courses and topographical sort of constraints that we could then proceed on and then take the next steps. And sorry, as far as the second question about the replacement, there was always a plan to reinstate those I guess vegetations that were removed, and staff certainly plans to proceed with that replacement.
Okay, and when will the replacement of the trees be done?
So thank you. Mr. Zwag is in the audience, Your Worship, and he is advising me that what we're doing based on council direction was to obtain some public input. And as soon as we've completed that process, which is underway in the next little after summer break, to ensure that we have, I guess, as big of a input as possible without people being away. So we plan to conduct that after the summer break, and then follow that through with the actual implementation of the project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of questions through to staff. The first question was with regards to as well the new satellite yard that Councillor Richter was referring to. The what kind of offset, financial offset, could we see from the current property? Could we sell the current property to offset the cost of the new one, or should something happen different with that property? So I know we talked here, $40 million. Could that be offset with our
Your
current
Worship,
property?
sorry, Councillor Whitmarsh, didn't mean to interrupt. Through you to Councillor Whitmarsh, this was never intended to replace the existing operations facility, but rather to augment it. So there was no plan to dispose of any lands that we have, any holdings in the Murrayville area that would actually serve the majority of township residents, existing residents, because it's conveniently, generally centrally located. So that has always been the plan, to continue our operations. And as the name suggests, the satellite would be simply a satellite yard that would augment the operations and allow staff to conduct the operations a bit more effectively and efficiently.
Right, okay, well, that's helpful to understand. The second question I had was, in the report, it indicated that there is now, originally there was talk about building an additional 27 lots that, of course, 24 parking stalls. That, of course, was changed, and we've gone back, and now it says that we found 10 additional parking spots within the operations yard. Is that, have they already been found? Is that moving forward, or that would be there is a sort of an increase of 10 parking stalls that we have now found that we could add to the current operations yard?
Thank you, Councillor Whitmarsh. Through Your Worship, the previous plan would have been to the south, and the suggested expansion to the north or suggested expansion to accommodate 10 parking stalls would be to the north. If you're familiar with how the operations center, operations yard is currently configured and utilized, there is a trailer, if you will, a mobile that is there to accommodate existing museum artifacts. And the plan would be to remove that off-site and ultimately, as council's aware, have them move into their new and ultimate permanent home whenever the Salishan Place has been completed. So this would be a temporary off-site storage that would then allow for the expansion of the parking area by the number of 10.
Okay, and so this would meet our short-term needs until we were able to acquire and build a new satellite works yard.
I wouldn't say it would meet our short-term needs, but it would go towards meeting our short-term needs because it's only 10 compared to, I think, what staff anticipates or has estimated to be 24. That number is still there in terms of the existing capacity, the existing staff that utilize the operations center. So that is just taking a step towards addressing that need.
Okay, so I guess the obvious final question is, what do we do in the short term with the remaining 14 parking stalls that are needed?
What staff is planning to do, Your Worship, is to continue and explore other opportunities, such as the options that we've identified. I think it's on page 3 of the report.
Yeah.
So, as an example, see if there are any opportunities for office spaces off-site. See if there are any opportunities for parking stalls, storage or parking of vehicles off-site, and a number of other sort of potential approaches.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davis?
Thank you. This staff parking has kind of dwarfed into a need for satellite, and I'm not. I think ultimately we need to be efficient is to go to a satellite, but just also temporarily. We have a couple pieces of property west of 208, down by. Geez, I can't even think of the road now. It goes. If you drive down it, you'll bump into the wastewater treatment plant in what's that street? It's right. It's actually on ALR land, I believe. We just bought a couple pieces of property there. We used one for dumping dump trucks with mud in it to try to clarify the water, and we use another site right beside it almost. To use, they sort things. They drive in up onto a ramp, and then we use it for sorting. Do you know what I mean, Mr. Backham?
Your Worship, I think we might be talking about the Yorkson floodplain lands, around
Yep.
102 and 208.
Yeah.
As was referenced, the lowlands are in a flooding area, and the lands that we're retaining are actually agricultural lands. So they could be used for short-term, uses such as midterm storage or things that might promote agriculture, but we can't use them in the long term within a non-farm use. So we can't do it on a permanent basis. So
that's why it's made of all bricks and all temporary. Okay, because there is a barn there that you could. I'm just trying to think about not spending 40 million, and if we for 10, for 25 parking spots, it seems like we're going down a path that we're kind of trying to justify parking, and ultimately, there's a lot of moors that could come out of Murrayville and go across on the other side of the freeway, and they don't need a huge shop. They just need a shop and 30 cars to park there and grab their weed eaters and off they go. And I guess we need to move ahead with this one, but I'm just concerned that we're spending bad money, good after bad. But on the other hand, if we think about what the amount we're spending here versus what we need to fix the problem properly, I think we need to just punt it down a little bit. We don't have to go the whole route, but we do have other pieces of property, I'm sure we do, somewhere that we don't have to spend $40 million on. It's got to be a few acres down there somewhere where we own. Anyhow, okay, those are just cheeky comments, kind of, somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. It seems to me, just to pull back a bit from the most immediate effect that we have, which is a lack of parking because of growth and expansion of this department, which is reasonable given the rate of growth in the township of Langley. It seems to me when we originally talked about the community amenity charges that there was some sense that we may wish to look at the operations center and other initiatives as part of the scope of what could be funded that way. So I'm wondering, through your worship to staff, is that something that we could still consider after the fact? I know we have discrete funding envelopes. Would that be up to a council in 2023 to look at whether or not there could be monies that would be secured that way?
Bracken?
So I think the question is, Mr. Seffi, could we change or add to the CAC policy the satellite works yard, or is it already included?
I don't recall, your worship, specifically if it's included or not. I know that, I'm just trying to see if I can grab all of the policy and speak with a bit more certainty and authority than what I can off the top of my head. Certainly it would always be council's prerogative to add or remove items from the CAC policy. So what I'm looking at currently being included are the following: 15% affordable housing. Yes. Then we have township-wide greenways, a satellite RCMP detachment, conference and entertainment center, recreation center in Willowbrook, Willoughby, and recreation center in Brookswood, Fenridge, and 11% to go to the Alder Grove core area plan. So we don't have a satellite operations yard identified, but I believe that it could be added with, I guess, either adjustments to ensure that the CAC dollar amount doesn't increase, or with the recognition that that would then in turn result in an increase in the CACs. One of two ways.
Thank you very much for that. And I do believe that that was discussed in the first instance, and then there was a concern about the nexus proposition. How is this going to be rationally tied to development in a particular community when in fact it addresses development in all of our communities and why we need to have it. But it does seem to me it's probably a good idea to review it, and based on what Mr. Safey is saying, that there would be certain parameters around which we could do that, but maybe we need to adjust some of those monies because I think it would be most prudent. I think the report is extremely helpful and it talks about interim measures to how to address some of the parking issues, but it's not going to resolve the problem in the longer term. We really need to start considering, as is mentioned, the 2023 budget process. But if we're constrained in 2023, and it is a rather large amount of money, I think we should start looking at reserves and making some funding into an envelope so that while we continue apace to utilize parking where we can find it through leasing, et cetera, that we also take money from another source and put it towards this, because that is rather an expensive endeavor, and I don't really see reasonably lots of other opportunities to probably do it on the cheap. So those are just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Long-term plan was to move the fire area to a new location where we build a new hall, wasn't that? Is that still the plan?
Yes, it is yours.
Yeah. So that was going to happen inevitably, but I guess the sad part, or maybe the silly part again, is that this council knee-jerked when they were going to expand the park, because that would have taken care of it. The 27 cars that would have been parked on the gravel parking lot would have alleviated the need to spend $30 to $40 million on a satellite yard. And so it's a shame, because I would have actually supported staff in that concept. Maybe council would have gone along with staff and said, hey, what are you going to do? What are you doing here? And can you make it, more appealing to the public? And we could have probably got their support, and that would have solved so many problems. But anyway, so now we're faced with 40 to 50 million, or 30 to 40 million dollars on a satellite yard.
Thank you.
Sad thing,
Yeah, however, I
But
think-
it is what it is.
Yeah, I think we've been considering a satellite yard for years. It's just maybe accelerated. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think there's any knee-jerk on behalf of the majority of council. And I was always told by all mayors that once a decision is made, to move on. Okay, Mike, I want to say I think this is a good option, but there was also an item 2 on our today's items for information from a Mr. Dan Mooney. He suggested he liked your report, but he also suggested some contact people, I think, in Richmond and Coquitlam. Does staff have a copy of that email or information from Mr. Mooney, if I may?
Yes. Mrs.
Okay,
Evans nodding.
good. So hopefully you can, okay, and the next main question is, regardless of what we do today, this is going to end up in another council in 2023, if I may, through the chair. So is there anything temporarily, I know I'm reading the report, I might have missed it, I hope I haven't, that we can do now, if I may, through the chair?
Mr. Seffi?
Thank you, Worship. I draw your attention to, I think it's, yes, this is a table that I wanted to draw council's attention to. Your Worship, in terms of what staff is planning to proceed with, are items 2, 3, 4, and 5 on this table. So we're going to explore potential leasing, as I said earlier, of available parking spaces. We're going to explore a carpooling program. We're going to explore a vehicle take-home program. All of these have implications, cost, as well as efficient servicing, I guess, consequences and implications. It's just, at this point, things for us to explore. And then the last one that we're going to explore is leasing opportunities of office spaces. So these are short-term approaches that we're going to follow and see what could be done. Obviously, the recommendation is number 7, which is a long-term process and a long-term plan.
Okay, so you said a lot now. So the number 1, 2, 3, and 4, you're going to implement prior to the budget in 2023?
2, 3, 4, and 5, not 1.
And 5.
One.
No, okay.
Yeah, not 1.
Thank you
One,
very much,
yeah,
Mr.
yeah,
Safety. I
thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify whether the motion and the agenda's been moved and seconded yet?
Yeah,
or
it
not?
has.
It
Yes.
has been? It's on
Yeah.
the floor? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wanted to just clarify that the desire to keep Old Yale Park as it is has not resulted in a $40 or $50 million expenditure. I just want to clarify that. That's absurd.
Okay, excuse me.
I want to clarify these comments. You just can't say something like that.
authorized to clarify that?
Okay, Councillor Long, Councillor Woodward has.
Is there a point of order on the floor?
Councillor Long, Councillor Woodward has the floor, and he asked for clarification. I can certainly clarify.
He said he was going to.
Councillor Long, he asked, and I can certainly clarify that this is a report with options, and as I said earlier, there have been discussions in Township of Langley that we need a satellite works yard, and that's been talked about for a long time, along with fire. Could I please have some? Thanks. Yeah, you're talking. This is like school. You remember you're a teacher, right? No talking. Both of you are teachers. Should know. You're getting scolded. It's right. Detentions for all of you. No, I'm just saying it's been talked about. Councillor Woodward is correct. I just want to say it's been.
Yeah,
It's been
thank
talked
you.
about for a
So
while.
there's
Thanks.
no linkage.
It took a
to
long
the-
time to say.
There's no linkage to preserving the state of Old Yale Park or wanting to see that restored. So, yeah, so I actually appreciated this. I think that I've actually asked about the long-term plans for facilities maintenance, road maintenance, and other maintenance requirements, works yards requirements over the past 2 or 3 years. So I think it's appropriate here. I'm again going to be questioning and wondering about the timing of it, and whether or not do I really want to endorse a satellite yard concept, with 1 or 2 meetings left, when I think that there are some other options to consider. So, Mr. Mayor, I think I'm going to probably just make a motion to refer this to the next council when you're ready to take that.
Okay, I think you can now. There's no further
You're going to make that
speakers.
referral?
Yep.
I'll make that referral.
Seconder? Councillor Richter seconds. So on the referral.
Speak to that a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think my logic there is, again, the size of that expenditure. I think having a motion passed by council to endorse in concept a satellite yard, presumably in the northwest area, is something that I think requires a bit more of a conversation. I think there are some other options to consider in regards to the long-term plan in the terms of the population growth that the township is headed in. I don't think that necessarily a satellite yard where most of the population is going to be is necessarily something I'm prepared to endorse. I would have liked to have seen a longer conversation, potentially at CPC or strategic planning for that. I think there are, again, I think third time, there are some other ideas that I think I've heard and I think I've discussed with senior management on and off that are not in this report. So I think that it would be appropriate to, again, for the sake of a few months, refer this to the next council and let them choose the direction this goes, which ultimately they'll do anyway, but I think it would be incorrect, I think, and with 1 or 2 meetings left, very challenging for me to endorse that direction here today, hopefully with the expectation that I'll return. Of course, if I don't, then that doesn't really matter too much. But if I do return, I don't necessarily at this today endorse this direction. So I'm going to challenge here to support this when I think there are other good ideas yet to be explored. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so on the, yeah, there all are. On the referral, I'm going to call the question. On the referral? Yes, the referral motion. Well, carries. Councillor Long, Councillor Arneson opposed. Okay, so now we move on to bylaws for first and second reading. F1 is rezoning application number 100653 and development permit application number 101205, Castle Hill Properties, bylaw 5805 for first and second. Could I have a motion, please?
I'll move it unless you want to defer it.
Councillor Long moves it. Councillor Whitmarsh seconds it. So it's on the floor. I've got to clear this. Okay. Councillor Woodward, I have to clear this. I think I had your did you want to speak to this? No. Okay. So Councillor Arneson, Councillor Richter. So Councillor Arneson, you go ahead.
Whoops.
There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah.
Time lag. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have a question about this one specifically, and it may not be the only instance that we've seen this, but through your worship to staff, maybe Mr. Safey, I noticed that it actually is being undertaken, these townhomes, in 2 phases. And so I'm wondering if that is something that obviously it's allowable. I don't think it's a best practice in the sense of the people that are living on that site, that there's going to be phases where people will be able to move in there, and then the next phase where now they're going to have active construction there. So is that something that we can remedy, or is that something that is totally within the control of a proponent to decide to do that if we allow them to do that kind of phasing? Thank you.
Mr. Safey?
Thank you, Your Worship. The actual phasing is something which is a question of, I guess, economic analysis by the developers subject to market conditions and the proponents and their team of consultants and professionals, including those to do with real estate marketing, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't really have a control per se over the phasing. What we have control over is making sure that everything is done in an orderly manner, such that any impact on existing residents is ultimately minimized. And we always tend to do that, plan to do that as part of our normal process, including access, egress, landscaping. As an example, one of the requirements is always to have the landscaping completed substantially prior to the issuance of final inspection, because we want to make sure that the landscaping that may get affected or damaged by the construction is replaced and repaired by the proponents. So those things are looked at, but as far as the actual phasing is concerned, it is really a question for the developer and development proponents to decide upon.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I had a question with regards to the tree coverage. On page 1, the diagram there, and they just had it up on the screen if they want to go back to the geosource photograph. There, you see, that property looks very well treed, and yet on page 12, it says there's only 2 significant trees. So my question is, when were the other trees removed and how many were removed? Do we know that?
Mr. Sefi?
Your Worship, I don't know if trees actually were removed. Sometimes the aerial photography doesn't reflect the, I guess, the caliber of trees, if you will. So we rely on professional arborists to determine whether, not whether, but the number of trees that meet the definition of our bylaw in terms of significant. And what I can confirm for council is that the enumeration of the number of trees is based on the professional arborist report.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll call the question on F1. Carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson opposed. Move to F2. This is rezoning application number 10685, Landstone Properties, Murrayville Limited, bylaw 5808. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Ferguson, and second by Councillor Whitmarsh. Any discussion? Councillor Arneson?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This may be premature, but I'm just looking at this as infill and seeing that the houses, based on the renderings there, will be in fairly tight proximity to each other. Mr. Safi, could you give us an update regarding the under eaves lighting, exterior lighting policy that we've been working on? Because I foresee that with the type and size of housing here, that could be a problem, as it has been in other areas. Thank you.
Mr. Sefi?
Your Worship, there is a requirement for proponents, for applicants at building permit stage to comply with all of our bylaws and policies, which includes making sure that there's no encroachment of lighting, and that will be taken care of at time of building permit.
It's just that I've seen that most recently in our community. So if I get a call late at dusk saying that the lights are shining into the neighbor's house, then I guess I'll just call bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll call the question on F2. That carries. Councillor Richter and Arneson opposed. Move to F3, rezoning application number 100547 and development permit application number 101029, Qualico Mitchell Williams. It's bylaw number 5807. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Long moves it, seconder. Councillor Whitmarsh. See, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I note that there are 158 significant trees on this property. Only 1 will be retained, and 30% of the replacement trees won't be planted on this site. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, just the proposal is application to rezone. This is a third application, well, maybe more than the third, but they want to rezone it. Could maybe staff just comment on where we're rezoning this to? Like it was R1A and R1F, and they want to rezone it to country CD 172.
So yes, Mr. Sefi, if you comment, it's being rezoned to the official community plan designation, I believe, but maybe you could give further clarification.
That's correct, Your Worship. There are no amendments proposed to the official community plan. So the rezoning is consistent with the Williams community plan, neighbor plan, and the existing is SR2, which is the historic zoning of the site. And the proposal is to go into a mixed use, or not a mixed use, mixed residential zoning of consisting of R1A, R1F, RCL, and CD 172, which is essentially single family, different types, and townhouses.
So it's not, there's no more density going to be put in that corner?
Your Worship, the zoning is consistent with the OCP.
There's no official plan amendments to this. It's consistent. So
okay, so that exactly the last time you explained it to me, up on the west side of the residential side and the south side of 80th. So it's not that there's going to be, well, it will still fall in the OCP density rate.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. I have a similar concern regarding the loss of trees there. We have new strategies and climate change action that we want to make. I know it's a challenge that when we redevelop areas that we try our best, but this does not seem like a best attempt, in my opinion, to try and maintain existing trees. And the problem is recognized, these trees that we put in there, replacement trees, even if they're multiples of the trees that were existing, even if that were the case, takes 20 or 30 years for them to become of any substantive size. So that's my comment, and I won't be supporting this. My other concern basically is that we don't have any sense, I know this is true from past discussion, about phasing any of our developments. And I look at this and say we still have enough traffic woes that we haven't really addressed, and now we're developing in another community, and I'm not personally satisfied that just because adjoining roadways are going to be expanded, that that's a really good way to address the issue. I think we still have hopscotching around is not really a good strategy without having a more robust infrastructure measures to make sure that we're not inadvertently creating all sorts of other traffic congestion and problems by opening up yet another new neighborhood to more density, more people coming to the area without adequate roadway infrastructure.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question on F3. And it carries with Councillor Davis, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Richter opposed. We go to bylaws for first, second, and third reading. 2023 permissive tax exemptions, bylaw number 5812. Have a motion, please. Councillor Davis, second, Councillor Kunst. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I just had a question with regards to the Inclusion Langley Society. And I note that they've got 6 different properties there that are being exempted for a total tax load of $28,524. I'm just wondering, why do they have 6 properties? Like, what do they do?
Who's going to handle that? Ms. Ruff?
I believe they have some supportive housing, but I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to get back to you.
Okay. And the other question that I had is, when was the last time we reviewed the organizations on these lists in terms of the works that they do in the community? Or has that ever been done?
Ms. Ruff?
They apply each year, and they have to meet our criteria.
So it's done annually.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question on G1. Carries unanimously. Move on to H, bylaws for consideration at third reading. We have H1 as official community plan amendment, rezoning application number 100219 and 100233, and development permit application number 101199, 83 apartments east-west, bylaw 5727. And could I have a motion, please? Councillor Arneson moves it. Second, Councillor Kunst. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I'm got some concerns about this because I'm wondering if it shouldn't be sent back for another public hearing, as when the first one was done, it was essentially 100% below market housing, and now 49% are going to be market housing. And it seems to me that we made some significant concessions in the design of this property and the layout because it was going to be below market housing, and it's not now. It's only 50% below market housing. So I'm just wondering, why wouldn't this just automatically be sent back to a public hearing?
I'll ask Mr. Backen, I believe because the use hasn't changed.
That's correct, Your Worship. It's still residential uses, so whether it be rental or be tenured through ownership, it's still a residential use. So as a consequence, The zoning is in effect, and in fact, this is really about the housing agreement itself. And the difficulty with the housing agreement was with the changes to the federal and provincial systems, and primarily the federal system. It made the previous, tenure, that being the entirely rental, unaffordable. So this is the attempt to actually move that forward. And what we've done in that context is we've made sure that any, benefits that were being given have been, altered so they're proportional. So if it was $100 before, it's now $50, representing the fact that it's only 50% of the units that are going to be for the rental market. So.
No, but I still recall that that particular development was allowed to be more dense, that roads for it were changed, that there was significant public feedback against it. But ultimately, we justified it on the basis of that they were providing below market housing. It may still be housing, but it's not below market, and that to me is significant. And how do we stop a precedent going forward where people come to us at first and second again and say they're going to build below market housing, and then by the time it gets to third, they've given up half of the below market housing? Like, this just does not seem right. And for that reason, Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, if I may, now, I know there's some change, if I may, through a chair, that council had to look at. Now, entering into an agreement, has the applicant changed, or it's the same applicant? That's the first one. And number two, there is a formula for something called affordable housing through CMHC. Is that correct, if I may, through a chair?
Safi?
Your Worship, the applicant has not changed.
Okay.
As Mr. Backen referenced earlier, the reason for the reduction of the number of affordable units is the change in the federal regulations affecting interest rates and mortgages. So that is the first question. The second question, in terms of the
PMHC,
the definition has not changed either, and the applicant is able to comply with the definition of CMHC, which is consistent in the Township of Langley. So the definition of affordable housing is consistent with those of CMHC.
And I see that in the report as well. I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question on H1. That carries. Councillor Richter opposed. Bylaws for final adoption was removed. We move to minutes of committees. K1 is Seniors Advisory Committee, June 15th, and Agriculture Advisory and Economic Enhancement Committee of June 22nd. Could I have a motion to receive the minutes? Councillor Coons, Councillor Arneson seconds it. I'll call the question on K1. Carries unanimously. K2 is Seniors Advisory Committee recommended motion, and it's Council directs staff to collect and develop maps on vulnerable senior populations to inform future planning initiatives, including extreme heat. Councillor Ferguson moves. Councillor Arneson seconds. Councillor Arneson, speak to it.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Just by way of explanation, I wanted to help Council to understand the sequencing of this. Actually, the motion that was made is out of sync with the grant that we approved of at our last meeting, just because of the way that the minutes came forward. So basically, this was in support of the grant that we have already endorsed that's going to be mapping these areas of vulnerability. So we've already said yes to this, but our committee wanted to make sure that they voiced their support for this as part of their work plan and activity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I see the clerk's note says can be included. So my first question is, will it be included?
Who would answer that one? Mr. Sevi?
Yes, Your Worship, it will.
Okay. And my second question is the vulnerable senior populations, these maps, are they focused specifically on Township of Langley, or do they include the city as well?
Your Worship, I believe it includes the city as well, but I can confirm that.
Okay, so will there be any cost to us, or will all of the costs be covered by the grant that's been applied for?
There are no contributions required from the township at this stage, and these are analyses that don't necessarily result in implementation that would then require significantly higher rates of expenditure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll call a question on K2. Carries unanimously. Move to the Mayor and Council report. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. So Canada Day took place on July the 1st, and we had quite a busy time. A lot of councillors were out and about. Councillors Arneson, Kuntz, and Whitmarsh participated in the Greater Langley Canadian Celebration Parade. I'll wait for the slides to come up. Organized by the Aldergrove Agriculture Fair and Festival Association. There we go. Lots of red. I like it. Councillor Ferguson attended a Canada Day celebration in Fort Langley. And Acting Mayor David Davis spoke, and Councillors Arneson, Kuntz, and Whitmarsh attended the Township's Canada Day celebration at the Aldergrove Athletic Park. There's much to see and do, including Taekwondo demonstrations, the Langley Ukulele Ensemble, First Nation powwow, and Bollywood dancers, and many booths for children and adults of all ages. On July 3rd, Acting Mayor Davis attended the Western Canada Challenge U16 Tackle Football Championships at McLeod Athletic Park, where he participated, and I will underline the word participated, in the ceremonial kickoff. And sorry for your injuries. Okay, I am a little teeny bit. No, it was obviously, yeah. You took it for the team, that's all I can say. Thank you. On July 4th, Foundry Langley held a soft opening to celebrate and recognize those who have been an integral part of the development of the new youth health and wellness facility in Langley. I had the opportunity to tour the Foundry on July the 6th and was amazed at the progress they've made and the details they thought of to make youth feel more welcome and comfortable in this space. This facility is going to be such a wonderful addition to the Langley community. We thank everyone involved in bringing this much-needed support to our community. And I must say, I was very impressed. And the decor has been designed and approved by a youth committee. And I said I'll hire them to do my interior decorating anytime if ever I need it. They did an excellent job. And it's a very inviting space. And I want to thank all of the community donations and volunteers who've made this happen. This is going to be huge for our Langley community. Councillors Arneson and Woodward attended the Langley Lodge Family Appreciation Barbecue Lunch on July the 9th. And looks like you had some good entertainment. I've always enjoyed those. Yeah, good. So, yeah. Also on July 9th, Councillor Arneson attended the Tatalo Festival at A Roche's summer celebration, where she spent the afternoon celebrating the Tatulu, which is the Little Campbell River. There were guided tours, musicians, artists, poets, and activities for children of all ages celebration event. And finally, on July 10th, I attended the Barden Valley's production of William Shakespeare's Measure for Measure at Township 7 Winery. And this production, put on by all volunteers, speaking Shakespearean language, was fantastic. They did a great job, and it was a nice evening to sit in the vineyard and have a glass of wine and watch Shakespeare. Good to see these activities back in our community. So with that, that's my report, and if Council has anything to add. Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, liquid waste I got this weekend, this coming up week, and they are proceeding, as we all know, on both the Langley side and the Maple Ridge side about putting the pipe through underneath the river, which is an accomplishment, and making sure people always make sure they only flush pee and poo, nothing else goes down those particular drains. Okay, my next thing is the Indigenous Relations. We had a meeting with Metro last week, and we had, Canada is very busy. Canada did a presentation to our Indigenous Committee about next step for land use and the federal government's steps in land use. reconciliation and otherwise, and there'll be more and more to come. They've told us there'll be new changes in federal legislation and working with Indigenous nations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, two things to report. Number one, that the board had a meeting last week. The Metro Board had a meeting last week to review progress on the strategic plan, and it was a very impressive presentation by staff as to the number of strategies that have been implemented. And of course, Mayor Froese spoke about the solid waste initiatives. And I also wanted to note that the work that Councillor Ferguson has done on the Indigenous Committee was recognized by the chair of the Indigenous Committee.
Thank you.
So good work,
Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson. The second thing is the Flood Resiliency Task Force that I sit on did a tour on June 29th of the Pitt Meadows dike system, and that was fascinating because they've got like 800 kilometers of dikes. That's the most dense amount of diking in the lower mainland, and they, by virtue of the sheer volume of dikes that they have become, their staff have become very excellent, what's the word I'm looking for, stewards of dike systems. So I wanted to draw this to staff's attention because when the Flood Resiliency Task Force finalizes its mandate and presents its report, I think Langley will likely be surprised to find out, or maybe not, that our diking system is not as up to par as it needs to be. And so the staff at Pitt Meadows might be a resource for our staff to connect with on how to improve things.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for that. And Councillor Arneson. Oh, sorry. For some reason, I keep forgetting to push.
Thank you. Just a couple of items, Your Worship. Yeah, I just wanted to comment, the Fraser Valley Regional Library, the Summer Reading Club is off and running from July 4th. Families can register. It's a wonderful way to keep up literacy skills, in particular for kids. Once they're no longer enrolled, they can erode rather quickly. So it's a fun way for families to do something over the holidays and celebrate the joys of books and reading. Also, I was at the Metro Climate Action Committee, which is the last meeting before our summer break. It was very interesting. I thought one of the things of particular interest in the township is the open air burning strategy of Metro Vancouver. They're trying to work, obviously, on ways to reduce the amount of air pollution and smoke that's negatively affecting residents, and also to promote the opportunities for different types of ways to be more sustainable in reducing and utilizing this kind of debris and detritus that comes from farming operations that has historically been burned. The other thing that was interesting, our chair, Adrienne Carr, as some of you may know, she recently came back from an international conference, the ICLEI conference. It was in Malmö, Sweden, and it's a very interesting conference, and it invites global leaders to talk about workshopping, having tours, and all sorts of ways for us to understand and get more information, education about sustainable urban development. And there was some discussion about potentially Vancouver applying to host one of these in the future. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And you may as well keep your mic on because we're going to other business, and
yes,
you're next with 01, the motion. So
yeah,
turn it over to you.
I'm just going to move the motion on second stage housing for women and children fleeing violence.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Arneson, second by Councillor Kuntz. Councillor Arneson, did you wish to speak to it?
Your Worship, I think it's probably pretty self-evident. I know that all of Council was here to hear the Ishtar delegation. I think that this was put together in a way to create a strategic step forward, just to bring certain maybe councillors who are not quite as up to date about what's going on, is that BC Housing actually has had a shake-up at the highest levels. And so I feel that perhaps this static situation where we're apparently in the township in line to be funded, but it hasn't happened yet, could actually change as a result of our advocacy. So I want to make sure that we are taking active steps in order to initiate other levels of government. And the 4 different items that I worked together with staff are really have been identified as timely things that can be done by the township. Of course, reading the motion, it strictly indicates that this is only to get a report back. So in endorsing this, you're not expending any, extraordinary township funds. It's something that's already obviously embedded in our housing action plan as a priority. And so I'm hoping we'll be supportive of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yeah. While the intent of this motion is good from a social perspective, I can't support it because it goes way beyond what the delegation actually asked for. And if you look back to the June 27th minutes on page 2, Ishtar with other community service providers are calling for support by requesting the Ministry of Housing to build second stage housing to address the cycle of violence and enhance the lives of women and children in Langley. So they came to us and they asked us to undertake an advocacy role. This motion goes way beyond an advocacy role because it is committing staff resources to producing a report, rather than sending a letter, an advocacy letter to the province on funding stage 2 housing. So I would like to refer this to the next council's strategic priority meeting and their CPC for review. And I would like to supplement by adding that this council send an advocacy letter to the province on funding stage 2 housing.
Thank you. I'll come back to you on that. Councillor Woodward. Okay, so Councillor Richter, you can make the referral if you wish.
Yes, I will refer this motion as it stands to the next council's strategic priority meeting and their CPC.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Councillor Woodward seconds it. So on the referral, does anybody wish to speak to it? Councillor Long?
Well, we don't know if the next council will have those council. Why don't we just refer it to the next council? I mean, I don't know what meetings they're going to have. I suppose it doesn't really matter, but they may or may not have that same meeting structure.
It'll be interpreted that way, I think. Okay, I'm going to call the question on the referral on 01. Carries with Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Kuntz, Mayor Froese, Councillor Arneson opposed. Move on to 02.
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to put the supplemental motion in on that, which is that this council send an advocacy letter to the province on funding stage 2 housing in the township of Langley, as asked for by the June 27th delegation.
Mr. Backenhauser.
Your Worship, we recorded the motion as being both parts, so if that was incorrect, we should go back, but we have both parts, which is referral and then send the letter.
Okay.
So it's covered. Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm going to clear the queue and start all over again. Councillor Richter, you're on. 02. I think you're here. Hold on. There, you lost your. There we go. Okay, go ahead.
I'll move the motion.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Davis seconds it.
Okay.
Councillor Richter, do you wish?
Yes, I want to speak to it. And it has been referenced today, and certainly this was a decision that this council made in order to provide a level playing field for the next municipal election, that there won't be any more council meetings until after July 25th. But one of the first orders of business that the next council is going to have to deal with, once it's dealt with its priorities, I guess, will be the budget. And between now and when that will occur in November, December, staff still need to be working towards some sort of a budget target. Now, this council revised the process for developing the budget by saying that in July of each year, the council would set a target budget for the following year. So this motion is basically asking staff to set the target 2023 Township of Langley property tax rate increase at no more than 3% and preferably less. And of course, this recognizes that it's not ultimately our decision. It will be the new council's decision, but staff still need a target to work towards over the next 4 months. So that's the purpose of this motion.
All right, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Councillor Long.
Well, first of all, I think that's inaccurate, what I just heard, that staff require a target from council to prepare a budget. I think staff prepare the budget that's appropriate. They put everything together, and whatever the number is, it is, and council has its say, and staff has its say, and the public has its say. So that premise to me doesn't exist. You know, in the real world, you can't possibly pick out a number out of a hat today and say that's what your budget's going to increase or by, because you don't know any of the details in the budget. So most certainly, if we just leave it alone, which is what we should do, the new council will, with the help of staff, develop a program for a tax regime for next year. It could go up, could go down, who knows? But it's not in our purview to determine at this point. And I've certainly objected to it in this last year as well, that just to preset a budget to me was just, that's just not good business. So I think this motion should be voted down for sure and allow the new council, which is apparently the intent is to empower the new council. Well, the power belongs to the new council already. So they'll determine the budget and staff will help them, and we don't need to be interfering.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I think the task of this council is to keep our tax increases as low as we're able to, recognizing the increased costs that we face as a community, particularly the significant inflationary increase that we've had over the last year. And so for us to determine today, prior to a new council, that 3% is somehow a target number, doesn't seem to doesn't make sense to me in reality. I think staff recognizes that we're trying to keep tax increases as low as possible. They already understand that. They understand that council's task is to do that, and then we're interested in seeing it to be as low as possible within a framework that allows our community to keep moving forward, and in a time that's highly inflationary. So I don't support this number right now. We've already today suggested some things are the responsibility of the next council, and I think the number that we set should be the responsibility of that council as well. So I think we should leave it for now.
Great, thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
If I may, through the chair, I appreciate the councillor putting the information on the table so that it does follow our policy. Through the chair, I want to ask you, what are we at? Does anybody either in finance or administration know either the costs of living, the consumer price index, and something we used to call a municipal price index, if I may, through the chair?
Ms. Ruff?
I don't have any information on the municipal price index because it's very difficult to calculate, but the CPI, I believe, was about 6.5 when I last looked.
So I think as much as I appreciate that we have to look at numbers, with the needle keep changing on us with those the cost of living and the consumer price index, I think it's hard to put a number on it. But that doesn't change the fact that the staff that can't continue working on the formal budget process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mayor, but I seem to recall that this council spent a great deal of time revising the budget process with the help of Dr. McIntosh. And one of the steps in that revised budget process was for council to get involved before staff started working to give them direction on where the budget should be going. And that's exactly what this motion is proposing, that we follow the process that we revised with the assistance of Dr. McIntosh. Now, in terms of the 3%, I'm fully anticipating that staff may have or may wish to exceed that because of all the add-ons that may come out of the new council's priorities. But having said that, the 3% that we put in place this year which was a very reasonable, I think, target to have set, and that we did deliver on, ended up in more than 3% for a fair number of township property owners, myself being one of them. In the last 2 years, my township taxes have gone up for $1,000, $500 a year, because I don't pay 3%, I end up paying 12%. So we can't keep not understanding the ramifications of tax increases to property owners. And they're the ones that are dealing with the inflation, and I don't think they can afford $500 tax increase every year with a 3% tax margin set. So we need to be cognizant of the cost of living crisis that is facing the members of our community, and that includes the people who have to pay property taxes. And that's why I think if we set this target and staff works towards it, and if in the final analysis the new council needs to go higher, then that's their call. But staff should be working towards a 3%.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll call the question on 02.
Thanks.
Motion fails with Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Kunst, Mayor Froese, Councillor Long, Councillor Arneson opposed. And Councillor Richter, you're still on for your next one.
Yep, okay, I'll move the motion concerning the rodeo.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Arneson seconds it. Councillor Richter, did you wish to speak to it?
Yes. What I wanted to say is that the issue with the P1 zoning that exists on this property that the rodeo is proposed on or proposed for is problematic because it's inferring, it's not defining. And I think we need to get a legal opinion on how much this inference can go forward in the future for any other P1 zoned area in the township. The motion also asks that the Township of Langley prohibit any future P1 zoned events which involve any form of animal cruelty. So this is to get a legal opinion on the P1 zoning and move forward from there relative to the rodeo.
Okay, thank you. I'll call the question on 03. David, sorry, I pushed too soon. Okay, because it is, okay, I'm going to go back because that didn't work. I'm going to go back, so I pushed too soon. I know you're pushing your button. 03, I'm asking for a recall, a revote.
Revote. Okay.
And now I got to wait. Councillor Woodward. Thanks. Okay, the motion carries. Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Kunst, Mayor Froese, Councillor Long opposed. And move on to 04, cell phone coverage. So I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Kunst. There we go.
Yeah, sure. I'll move that.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Arneson seconds it. Wish to speak to it?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if there's too many people in Brookswood or Fernridge or Aldergrove that haven't probably done what I've done. Stand in one spot in your house, go outside in the driveway, go upstairs, try to find the best place to take the phone call, drop phone calls. It's just been something I think for the last few years that's just been getting worse. So that's why I brought this notice of motion forward. The other day, my husband told me to stop walking around the house because he thought I was, not standing in the right spot to take his phone call. Anyway, so see where that goes.
All right. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I would just say that.
Hang on, something went wrong there. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Whitmarsh. Yeah. Thank
you. Living in Brookswood, I can attest to the challenges of cell phone service, and this is certainly a challenge. I've done many of the same things that Councillor Kunst has suggested, even doing the cell phone reception dance, and it has not seemed to work. So I think I'm very supportive of this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and I think that given what we experienced on Friday last week, this is extremely important to see if we can't get more providers working together. And it's nice to know that the federal government did come out today directing that cell phone providers work better with each other. So there should be some opportunities to get this happen through that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
I'm an ostrich. My head is in the ground. We had more freedoms when the phone was attached to the wall. So you knew you got good phone service there. Anyhow, I'm just teasing.
Yeah. Just need a longer string between the tin cans, that's all. All right, I'll call a question on 04. Carries unanimously. Looks like we all love our cell phones. All right, bike lanes. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I'll move the motion.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Arneson.
Point of order?
Councillor Long.
Can it be corrected first? I mean, it doesn't 248 run north and south, so how can it be bike lanes on the north and south of 248?
Oh, you mean
Or
on
the east and west sides.
West side, okay. Okay, Councillor Richter, I'll let you speak to it.
Okay, so recently 248th Street had a series of signs go up that denote a bike lane and paintings in the sidewalk. And the questions that I'm raising in this motion concern the potential liability because 248th Street, there are a lot of bikes that use 248th Street for tours and whatnot. But for the most part, there's a lot of pedestrians that use 248th Street as well. And in a lane that's marked with a bike and a sign that says bike, is there a potential liability if a bike hits the pedestrian? And who is liable in that situation? For example, if a pedestrian is in a lane that's marked bike, does the pedestrian bear the liability because they were in the bike lane? The other thing about 248th Street, and I'm not sure this applies to all the other streets, but I'm sure there are a number in the township that does apply to, the ditches are very, very steep on the side of 248th Street. So a pedestrian can't just jump out of the way of a bike, because if they jump to one side, they go into a ditch, and if they jump to the other side, they go into oncoming traffic. So I'd like to get these questions answered. And I'd also like to find out if we can use multimodal lanes throughout the township so that it's not just bikes that can go there, but pedestrians and scooters and baby carriages and everything else.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
My question, maybe it's to the mover, Your Worship, is I'm not sure which the avenues that we're talking. So it's 248th Street, but from where to where?
From Fraser Highway all the way up to 72nd Avenue.
Fraser Highway to 72nd. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Well, I'm just wondering why the council couldn't just pick up the phone and speak to staff about this a bit, so I don't know. So this is another report we're going to commission, and I guess there's lots of questions here. Could that not be dealt with in another way rather than coming to council?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call the question on 05. And it carries with Mayor Froese. Councillor Long opposed. Is there any other business?
Yes.
Councillor Richter, go ahead.
I have here 2 notices of motion for the July 25th meeting. One concerns the access that, or the equitable access that Aldergrove residents have to the ACUCC and the Otter Co-op outdoor experience pools. I've got it written out. I won't read it. I'll just give it to staff. And the second concerns our contract with Rogers for cell phone and internet access, and asking that we get a cost and feasibility study done to change our current cell provider and internet provider based on their track record over the last 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, I also have some items in the items distributed that I wanted to ask about.
Okay.
But I can wait and come back to that
Okay,
after
we'll go through
everybody
them.
else is.
Right, Council Long.
Yeah, I'm sure other councils are going to figure out what are we going to do with Mr. Clark's presentation. So I don't know if we could refer that to staff. Maybe we can do some advertising to ask people if their wells are leaking. Could they seek help? I don't know, but I know that something needs to be done. He was very passionate, as you can.
Yeah. So
Council
maybe
knows.
Mr. Back and the delegation, Mr. Sindridge's delegation, if staff could look into it and address this
Yeah,
concerns.
just address the concerns.
Thanks.
And then secondly, Your Worship, the other delegation for the property on 72nd, I don't know well, I guess I can go back and read the report a couple more times, but that was a delegation from Ms. Henry,
Yeah.
Ms. Bonnie Henry.
So the process on that would be at the next meeting, if a member of council may have time prior to the agenda coming out, to put in a motion to have a reconsideration. It has to be due notice, so that would be either, could think about it and do it prior to Wednesday, I guess,
okay.
Wednesday noon, before the meeting.
And Mr. Cedric, can I refer his concerns to staff as well, Your Worship? Cedric?
Yeah, that's what you did. I thought we did that.
No. we
Oh,
didn't.
sorry.
There was two. of
Clark.
them.
Oh, Clark and-
Mr.
oh.
Clark, Mr. Cedric.
Okay. Good, thanks. Councilor Arneson?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Just two notices of motion. One is about Horn Pit. The other is the Parks Master Plan update. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Richter?
Yes, the AAEEC overview that was given today, I just wanted to ask staff, will that be coming back with details or for a motion to approve? Because I want to go back to the recommendation 2A on abattoirs and
Your
housing.
Worship, maybe I can just provide some comments. The work programs of committees are by necessity approved by council. So I would suggest that the intent of the presentation was to obviously, to the extent possible, try and obtain council's support. But the actual formal request for support will have to come through a motion of the committee at some point, and then we'll see what happens with that
Okay.
at that point.
So the committee will make a recommendation to council. Okay, that's answers my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
And then the items
Okay.
distributed? Okay, so from July 7th, number 5 on page 8, I was wondering if a copy of this report will be sent to the individual who raised the concerns, and the same thing with item number 6 on page 15.
Back. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Done.
Yeah. And then items 16, 17, 18. Can we get a staff brief update on those? Like what action was taken?
Which are those?
And then number 20, I was just wondering if an acknowledgement was sent. That's on page 87.
Mr. Backen, do you? Sorry, number 20 on 87?
Your Worship, if not, we'll send one. I'm not certain at this point.
Yeah, it's been forwarded on to staff. Yeah.
And then from the July 11th items list that came out today, numbers 8 and number 9 on page 20 and 21. Again, can we get a staff update on those?
Okay. All right. Oh, Councilor Ferguson. You got everything, Mr. Backen? I just want to make sure you caught up. Okay. Councilor Ferguson.
Yeah, I just had something really positive. I wanted to ask the staff how the community is progressing with the new museum construction, if I may.
Mr. Backen?
I guess the short answer is still progressing, Your Worship. Just a reminder that the focus is on completion of the shell and then revisiting the FF&E, furniture, fixturing, and equipment at a later date. There's some provision for that through grant money. It looks like that there will be, I guess, a grand opening hopefully in the late summer or early fall of 2023, which is our original timeline.
Thank you very much. Very, very positive.
Thank you. Okay, see no other business. So before we move on, I just want to say that next meeting is the last regular scheduled meeting of Township Council. I'll be presenting a term and review report, and there'll be an opportunity for each member of council if they wish to say a few words. We'll move through that, and we'll do that in other business. So I'll give a brief mayor's report, and then other business, I'll go through the term and review, and then councillors can have a few words, as it is the last regular scheduled meeting, and then we'll do a term and review report, okay? Just for your information. And so with that, I need a motion to resolve into special close for the agenda items and on table. I move by Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Kunst, and Councillor Richter.
I'd like to add a property item, please.
Okay, thank you. Property, and I will add a law enforcement item. Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Need a motion to terminate. Termination. Second. Moved by Councillor Davis. Obviously, his leg hasn't stopped his energy and exuberance, and Councillor Whitmarsh quietly seconded it, and all those in favor, opposed, carried. Thank you. Meeting's terminated. Thank you very much for coming out. We'll go to our closed meeting. We'll reconvene our public hearing at 7 p.m.
So do we have a break now?
Yeah.
For closed?
Are we going in the other room? Oh, good.
Oh, we are going in the other
Oh, I
room?
think so, yeah. Are we, or are we staying here? We're going, good, good.